Chapter 695. Li Long stared at the 3 true spirit pellets. His heart moved greatly. The value of true spirit pellets to Qi practitioners was self-evident. With these 3 true spirit pellets in his hands, he would definitely be able to successfully build his foundation and take over the position of the head of agriculture. However, he took in a deep breath and didn't reach out his hand to receive them. "I don't deserve it. You've helped me kill an enemy. That's your merit. Don't be so wishy-washy. I told you to take it, so take it." Li Qingshan shoved the true spirit pill into Li Long's hand. "I will take good care of this child." Li Qingshan smiled and said, "That's your problem." Li Long clasped his hands and took his leave. Arriving outside the parlor of clouds and rain, he crouched down and said to Pebble, "From today onwards, you'll be called Li Xiaoyao. It's a very good name." "I don't want it. He doesn't recognize me, so why should he change my name?" "Sigh, you are still young, but there are some things that you will understand in the future. By the way, don't mention your relationship to anyone." "He doesn't recognize me, and I don't recognize him. Uncle Li, you treat me well. I'll listen to you. If you want me to be called Li Xiaoyao, I'll be called Li Xiaoyao. You'll have to call me master from now on." Li Long smiled and patted his little head. "Come, let's go eat something, and then I'll give you a bath." "Yes, master." 2 figures, one big and one small, blended into the crowd. "Xiaoyao, do you like farming?" "What do you mean?" "It's farming." "I don't like it." "All right, then what do you like?" "I like herding cows, but old Huang is dead, so I can't do it anymore. I also like to play with swords, but my sword is gone, so I can't do it anymore." "I'd better buy you a sword." In the warm room, Li Qingshan stood there for a while and sighed softly. Although he never lacked decisiveness, he was not a heartless person. The sound of light footsteps came from behind him, and a soft and delicate body came up to him and wrapped around his waist. "We've finished talking. Why aren't you going back?" Li Qingshan said. "Ling Long, do you think you're lucky or unlucky to have met me? Of course it's a great fortune. If it wasn't for you, my lord, Ling Long is still an ordinary disciple. She might even be forced to sell her body." A year ago, Li Qingshan formally took over the Parlor of Clouds and Rain in order to provide the Cloud Wisp Association with another source of income. All the disciples of the sect of Clouds and Rain had come to see him, so he obviously did not have the time to manage the Parlor of Clouds and Rain. He needed an agent. Thus, he chose one disciple from the crowd. It was Ling Long. Her cultivation level was mediocre. At that time, she was only in the 6th layer of the aura refining realm. The reason he chose her was actually quite random. While the other female disciples held their heads high and puffed out their chests, trying their best to show off their charm, she was the only one under his gaze. She lowered her head, revealing a bashful expression. At that moment, her graceful bearing was extremely alluring. Ling Long still clearly remembered the situation at that time. He smiled and asked, "What's your name?" "Ling Long. From today onwards, you are the sect master of the sect of Clouds and Rain." Ah, thus, her fate underwent a complete change. The biggest change was that she had a man. From the moment he chose her as the sect master, in everyone's eyes, she had already become his exclusive property. Even she herself thought so. She was the sect master with the weakest cultivation in all of history, yet not a single person dared to disobey her. Her haughty senior brothers and sisters in the past all lowered their heads obediently. Even the extremely powerful foundation establishment cultivators treated her politely when they arrived in the Parlor of Clouds and Rain. With her beauty, she adapted to her new identity very quickly. She managed the sect of Clouds and Rain in an orderly manner. Li Qingshan pulled her in front of him and pinched her cheek. He smiled. Isn't it the same right now? Ling Long is willing, so how can it be the same? I hope you don't regret it in the future. Li Qingshan's words made Ling Long stiffen, but she immediately dismissed it. Li Qingshan's reputation was like the midday sun, let alone the Clear River Prefecture. He was renowned even across the entire Rui Commandery. He also had the Chan Monastery of Devanaga, one of the three great sects of the Green Province, as his backing. Just who could do anything to him? Ling Long definitely won't regret it. Let's go. Let's go back and see how young Master Hua is drinking and whether he's happy or not. Li Qingshan smiled and said nothing more. As soon as they returned to the top floor, Hua Sengzan grabbed him. Where did you go? Don't tell me you've gone off to have some fun? Come and drink. Li Qingshan accepted the cup of alcohol. He passed over and gazed at his peerlessly handsome, smiling face. Suddenly he asked, was it useful? Hua Sengzan was taken aback. A hint of bitterness appeared in his smile. It doesn't seem to be useful. In the past year, Hua Sengzan had changed quite a lot. He had gone from the infatuated man of the past to a dissolute man who spent his time in a luxurious brothel drunk. Why are you still drinking if it's useless? In Li Qingshan's eyes, Hua Sengzan was basically like a young girl who had failed in a relationship, so he went to a bar to get drunk and degenerate. He was not prejudiced against going to bed after drinking, but he believed that when Hua Sengzan woke up drunk and saw an unfamiliar woman beside him, he would definitely not be as happy as a regular man. He would probably even feel the pain of being defiled. What else can I do? Hua Sengzan laughed drunkenly. When he made up his mind to let go, he felt relief at the very beginning, but he soon felt even deeper pain and conflict. Without the sword of wisdom, it was difficult to sever the threads of love. Smack! A crisp slap landed on Hua Sengzan's face. Immediately, the parlor of clouds and rain fell silent. Everyone stared at Li Qingshan blankly. They never thought he would suddenly slap his good friend. Big brother, Li! Hua Qinglu cried out involuntarily. Han Che stood up. His expression changed as well. Ever since he was young, Hua Sengzan had never been humiliated like this. Li Qingshan said, "Wake up, big brother. Haven't I been rejected all the same?" Hua Sengzan was vexed at first before breaking into a self-deprecating smile. He touched the palm print on his face. "I'm different from you. Although you're more powerful than me in every aspect, you have absolutely no idea what love is. I can't obtain her, but I can't not love her." Smack! Without saying anything else, Li Qingshan slapped him again. Ru Xian was considered a genius in this field. With Lin Xian's help in improving the formula, the potion's effect was getting stronger and stronger. At the same time, she also made a stronger version of the Water of Oblivion. Hua Sengzan looked at Li Qingshan, who was blocking the door, and smiled bitterly. "It seems like I have no other choice." Li Qingshan said, "If you don't want to, You can castrate me. Hua Sungzan turned around and asked Ru Xian, this water of oblivion, is it really effective? It requires your active cooperation. If you reject the effects of the medicine and insist on remembering it, the effects will be much worse. Ru Xian took out a bottle of faint, purple potion and swirled it gently in her hand. Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. He glanced at her and frowned. If you need to remember it, then remember it. Why do you have to forget it? Ru Xian was still unwilling to confess everything, but Li Qingshan knew she held great hatred. She refused to talk about it because the enemy was extremely powerful. Even with North Moon's strength, he would still be in danger, which was why she refused to involve him. However, Li Qingshan had already made up his mind a long time ago. No matter when she wanted to go to the Mist Province, he would definitely accompany her and help her make a decision. Who asked a wretched demon like you to stick your nose in other people's business? Ru Xian rolled her eyes at him. I want to stick my nose in other people's business. What can you do about it? How could Hua Sungzan not understand? Ru Xian clearly recognized North Moon. Cut the crap. Are you going to drink it or not? Hua Sungzan made up his mind. I'll drink it. Chapter 696. The light purple liquid flowed into his stomach, and the water of forgetfulness began to spread. It was as if he had drunk 1,000 cups of wine. Hua Sungzan's eyes became misty. Li Qingshan and Ru Xian's silhouettes became blurry. He could not describe the feeling. It was neither sweet nor bitter. There was a kind of emptiness that went deep into his bones. Wherever it went, his heart became numb. My friend Hua, please close your eyes and try your best to remember what you want to forget. This is the effect of the water of forgetfulness. Ru Xian's voice seemed to be coming from a faraway place. It was as light as a gossamer, as if it could be blown away by the wind at any time. Hua Sungzan closed his eyes. He did not need to use much strength. There were some things that he could not forget even if he did not think about it. The first time he met her, the words that came after that, the pictures that came after that, all of them rushed out from the depths of his memory. Every frown and every smile was extremely sweet, but also the source of his pain. However, all of a sudden, all of these memories faded away. It was as if they had been washed away by the flowing water, drifting away uncontrollably. Hua Sungzan subconsciously reached out his hand, as if he wanted to grab those memories. He resisted almost instinctively. He did not want to forget her. However, this kind of effort made the effect of the water of forgetfulness reach its peak. Li Qingshan watched from the side. He saw Hua Sungzan frowning and half kneeling on the ground. His face was filled with pain and reluctance. He sighed and said, "Perhaps compared to him, I really do not know what love is." Ru Xian said, "As a human, how can we be emotionless? If you put tea leaves into a pot of water, you will get a pot of tea. But if you put it into a vat of water, the taste will be very bland. If you throw it into a pond, who can tell the difference?" Li Qingshan laughed and said, "Thank you for the compliment. It's rare to hear such nice words from you. However, we are not a pond. We need to absorb all the rivers and become a vast ocean. Actually, what I want to say is, you are not a human." "I knew it. You are not a human." "A mutant is still a human." Ru Xian raised her index finger and shook it. Bang, bang, bang. At this moment, there was a loud knock on the door. Li Qingshan opened the door, and Han Tie barged in. He saw Hua Sungzan kneeling on the ground with his eyes tightly shut and a pained expression on his face. Han Tie grabbed Li Qingshan's collar and asked, "What did you do?" "Brother." Hua Qinglu hurried over to help Hua Sungzan up. He turned around and said, "Commander, how can you do this?" "Let go. I'll still beat up your brother-in-law." Li Qingshan warned Han Tie before saying to Hua Qinglu, "Don't worry, I'm doing this for his own good. I guarantee that when he wakes up, he'll turn over a new leaf." Qinglu, Hua Sengzan slowly wakes up. He still remembers that it was Li Qingshan who brought him to the 100 Schools of Thought, but he has completely forgotten the reason. With his intelligence, he discovered many blanks in his memory very soon. Some of the things he remembered had become illogical. It was as if a story had been cut into pieces. Oh, right. I just drank the water of oblivion. But just what did I forget? He thought back instinctively. However, he found nothing. All of his thoughts had been sucked into a hole. His heart felt empty, but he felt lighter than he had ever felt before. Li Qingshan waved his hand gently. Han Tie was sent flying, falling into the lake. He crouched before Hua Sengzan and asked curiously, "Oi, Qingzan, do you still remember Gu Yenying?" "So she's called Gu Yenying." Li Qingshan raised his head and said to Ru Xian, "The quality of your medicine is terrible. What's the point of just forgetting a name? I want a refund and compensation." Ru Xian frowned. "I think the bamboo forest on Cloudwisp Island is pretty good." A few streaks of light flew through the night sky. Lu Chongqing and the others hurried back to the 100 Schools of Thought. Li Qingshan said, "There are no beauties as companions on Cloudwisp Island." Hua Sengzan said boldly, "There are many beauties in the world, but I only wish to win the heart of one." Li Qingshan, Hua Qinglu, and Han Tie looked at one another. Was he cured or not? "Don't worry, everyone. I'm not talking about Commander Gu. We might not be fated, but I believe there will always be a woman waiting for me somewhere in the 9 provinces. Before that, I don't want to be ostentatious and provoke other women." Li Qingshan had no idea how to react. In other words, he would find another hole to jump into. Could this be the so-called character determines destiny? In this aspect, he and Qiu Haitang were indeed a good match. Of the two of them, one was well-versed in worldly affairs, while the other was extremely clever, yet he just happened to be so attached to the word of love that he was almost naive. Li Qingshan felt deep admiration for him. Although he had the ambition of the 9 heavens, he did not believe everyone should be like him, roaming the world, waging war in the oceans, plucking the stars and the moon, and living forever were all grand and magnificent dreams. However, to many people, perhaps it was not as free and peaceful as sitting at home and drinking a pot of tea. People only had one life. As long as they could persist with themselves, that was enough. "Brother, you'll definitely find that person," Hua Qinglu encouraged. Then she glanced at Li Qingshan, and she could not help but become slightly resentful. This playful man was nowhere close to her brother in this aspect. Over the past year, Li Qingshan came to the Hawkwolf Guard much more often. He seemed like he was much more loyal to his duty. However, he actually still ignored everything, leaving it all up to her to deal with. He would tease her every time, as if he had specially come to tease her. What was even more hateful was that he still came so rarely. Li Qingshan patted Hua Sengzan's shoulder. "Just give up. You're no longer chaste." Hua Sengzan shuddered. Sure enough, he seemed like he had been dealt a blow. Li Qingshan could not help but laugh. "Oi, you're a man. Don't tell me you actually care about your chastity. It's already like this anyway, so you should just focus on your current happiness for now. Don't you see Commander Gu in the blink of an eye and fall in love at first sight and pledge your life to her? That'll be hilarious." Li Qingshan shook his head with a smile. Hua Qinglu became worried too. Ru Xian interjected, "If you drink too much of the water of oblivion, its effects will decrease." Hua Sengzan let out a heavy sigh. "I've already made a huge mistake. I can't repeat it. I'll request to switch places with Chenglu and return as a vice commander. I won't see Commander Gu again. My cultivation is insufficient. I'm probably not qualified to be a white wolf guard. Chenglu hesitated as her eyes flickered. It left Hua Sengzan helpless. In the past year, he had only been immersed in his own misery, but he had neglected to guide his sister. Originally, he thought she would be able to maintain a little more control after receiving the Banyan Tree King's blessing of wisdom, but he never thought she would still be in deep trouble. Li Qingshan smiled. If you don't want to be a white wolf guard, then just come back and enter secluded cultivation. Don't even think about touching my vice commander. If you want to chat, go out. If you want to drink, go out. With Ru Xian's order for them to leave, Li Qingshan reopened the banquet on Cloud Wisp Island. Lu Chongqing and the others drank a few more cups before returning to their dwellings. The others bid farewell and left in 2s and 3s as well. Chapter 697. Begonia was meditating at the bottom of the lake. Suddenly, she felt the water ripple and the lake water was separated. Her face lit up. She stood up to look in the mirror and used her slender fingers to tidy up her hair. When she turned around, North Moon appeared in front of her. She hid her joy and was about to speak when she saw Hua Sengzan beside him. She was shocked. Xiaohua! Hai Tang? The moment she turned around, Hua Sengzan almost didn't recognize her. She was dressed in plain clothes, and she was more beautiful than he remembered. She exuded a captivating charm. This wasn't just because she was practicing mind-dyeing rouge. When she walked out of the shadow of the past and listened to the moving, sweet words, she regained her confidence in herself. Naturally, she looked radiant. Begonia cast a questioning look at North Moon. Li Qingshan crossed his arms. This man found me. He said he wanted to see you. He has something to say to you. I don't want to see him. Please ask him to leave. Begonia turned around. She didn't want to be entangled with him anymore. She didn't want to be misunderstood. Li Qingshan looked at Hua Sengzan. Although Hua Sengzan was smart, he didn't know what to do in front of this woman who he had let down so much. Hai Tang, it's better to be clear about some things. If there's a knot in your heart, it'll be detrimental to your practice. Li Qingshan shook his head. His body slid backward and disappeared into the lake as he spoke. Hua Qingzan, what else do you have to say now that everything has happened? Qiu Haitang sucked in a deep breath and said without even looking back, That day, I couldn't stand up for you upstairs. It was the biggest shame of my life. Since then, I've been tossing and turning in bed. I'm filled with regret. At this point, Hua Sengzan choked and couldn't continue. Begonia slowly turned around. Seeing him like this, her heart softened. Now that things have come to this, what's the use of saying these things? Hua Sengzan said sincerely, It's useless, but please believe me, if I were alone, I would be willing to die for you. I believe that you are not a coward, but I want to ask you, if it were Gu Yenying, what would you do? Sorry, I don't remember her anymore. You don't remember? Begonia widened her eyes in surprise. She would have believed Hua Sengzan if he had said that he had forgotten anyone except for that woman. Hua Sengzan recounted the strange experience of the night. When the shadow of losing Gu Yenying shrouded him, the various memories of Begonia suddenly became vivid. He could not help but think, if he had not met Gu Yenying, if he had taken the water of oblivion earlier, would there have been a different ending? Begonia let out a long sigh. Then I really have to congratulate you. I can help you answer the question just now. If it were Gu Yenying, you would have thrown everything to the back of your mind just to make her smile. I understand this feeling. But do you know, at that time, I never asked you to throw everything away for me. I only wanted you to lie to me and comfort me. Whatever you can do for Gu Yenying, I am willing to do for you. But it's all in the past. Now you are doing well, and I am doing well too, am I not? Begonia turned her head and wiped the corner of her eyes. She let out a long sigh. After saying these words, she felt a lot more relaxed. Hua Sengzan was still the same Hua Sengzan, but unknowingly he had lost the magic that made her fall head over heels for him. Yes, this is the only thing worth celebrating. Otherwise, I would have regretted it for the rest of my life. Let's not talk about these disappointing things. I will use tea in place of wine to congratulate both of us for breaking free from our shackles and seeing the light of day again. As expected of childhood sweethearts, both of us are equally unlucky. Begonia smiled faintly and regained her composure. Indeed, it's time for me to sober up. The two teacups clinked lightly in the air. Their eyes met, and everything in the past returned to calmness from the intense atmosphere. Li Qingshan stood on the surface of the lake and silently felt the changes in the water god seal. Over the past year, the power that had been eroding his waters had been spreading continuously. It had now occupied a third of his waters, and there were no signs of it slowing down. It was clear that the other party had a large piece, or rather, a large number of water god seals. If all of this was said to be the Dragon King of the Sea's attempt to force him out, then it was not surprising that he could take out so many water god seals. He only smiled in response to this. So what if I have to give up on the entire body of water? It's not like I only want this body of water. He had not wasted the past year. Under constant practice and experimentation, the conflict between the spirit turtle and the phoenix had been greatly reduced. Although he was still some way off from merging fire and water, he believed he would be able to unleash the true ability of the phoenix very soon. This was all thanks to the two demon kings, the Banyan Tree King and the Golden Cicada Spirit King. Over the past year, Li Qingshan would go to the Azura field to chat with the Banyan Tree King when he had nothing to do. His clone resided in the lava and flames deep underground. When the Golden Cicada Spirit King had the time, he would chat with him as well. Whether it be in terms of cultivation or intelligence, they were existences that stood at the apex across the 9 provinces. Just a few words of advice would often enlighten Li Qingshan, allowing him to benefit tremendously. The value of this opportunity was immeasurable. It was no coincidence that Li Qingshan had gained their favor. The 9 transformations of the demonic and divine had made him the most resplendent new star of the current demons, while the will of the 9 heavens gave him the boldness to speak to demon kings on equal footing. Li Qingshan's cultivation was very important too. After undergoing the second heavenly tribulation, his strength might not have undergone any overwhelming changes, but his cultivation level was closer to the essence of the world, with that as his foundation. The difficulty of cultivating the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine was greatly reduced. According to his calculations, as long as he truly consolidated his cultivation of the first layer of the Phoenix's scripture of Nerva and possessed the 2 innate abilities of the Phoenix transformation, he would be able to reach Demon Commander. By then, his innate abilities would increase by another 4. That way, he would possess 12 innate abilities, and the innate abilities he already possessed would become stronger as well. His overall strength would undergo a qualitative change. By then, no one at the second heavenly tribulation would be his opponent anymore, and killing him at the third heavenly tribulation would not be easy either. He would possess the power to protect himself across the entire 9 provinces. If he could reach the 4th layer of the Phoenix transformation like the Spirit Turtle transformation and merge water and fire, refining a demon core of water and fire where water and fire coexisted, he would probably be able to reach the peak of Demon Commander. He would possess the strength to challenge Demon Kings, and if he took a step further, he would be a true demon king. Moreover, he would be a demon king with 16 innate abilities. By then, he would be able to move unhindered across the 9 provinces. How delightful would that be? However, up to this point, he had only cultivated the first 4 of the 9 transformations of the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine: the ox demon, tiger demon, spirit turtle, and phoenix. Moreover, he had basically only cultivated half of them. Probably even when he broke out of this world and leapt out of the well, he would not be able to cultivate any of the transformations. He just wondered if he would have the opportunity to see the transformations of the remaining 2 demons and 2 gods. Li Qingshan gazed at the sky. His gaze pierced through the clouds, the stars, and the moon directly towards the distant space. He extended his arm as if he wanted to pluck a star. The corner of his lips curled into a smile. 10,000 years? It won't take that long. Hua Sungzan's figure rose from the bottom of the water. When he saw this scene, he felt an inexplicable sense of shock in his heart. He followed the direction of his finger and looked up, but all he saw were dark clouds. What was he looking at? What was in the sky that was attracting him? In the endless heights that no one had ever reached, in the depths of the heart that even love could not touch, the dream would never die. Li Qingshan retracted his arm and looked back with a smile. How was the discussion? The way you looked just now, it was admirable and inspiring. I'm not interested in men. Me neither. Thank you. After being entangled for so long, it's time to start again. Hua Sungzan raised his head and gazed at the sky. He had ended 2 relationships of love and being loved. He had let go of all his stubbornness, guilt, and pain. Would he be able to restore his former glory and reclaim the title of genius? Of course, there was no need to think about the number 1 genius. The person in front of him was standing there. It seemed impossible to be the number 2 genius. Little and was firmly in this position. Other than these 2 people, he believed that he would not lose to anyone else. He did not say any more nonsense, like, "Please take good care of her." After cupping his hands, he left in a natural and unrestrained manner. Li Qingshan returned to the bottom of the lake. Begonia was sitting in front of the dressing table with her back facing him. Her eyes in the mirror slanted. Are you familiar with him? Although the lake was deep, she was worried and listened attentively. Naturally, she could hear their conversation. She felt that their conversation was very special, like they were close friends. We've only met a few times. Li Qingshan came behind her and pressed his hands on her shoulders. You're quite generous. Begonia was originally afraid that he would misunderstand, but when she saw his relaxed and casual look, she was very dissatisfied. Aren't you afraid that I'll run away with him? Li Qingshan smiled and leaned over to her ear. When I was outside just now, I was crazy with jealousy, but I believe in you. Her messy red hair blended into her long black hair. She felt a slight itch on her neck. She raised her eyebrows and said provocatively, "If I really change my mind and rekindle my old feelings, what will you do?" "Kill him. If you can't end it, I'll end it for you. Aren't you afraid that I'll be sad and hate you for the rest of my life?" The corner of Begonia's eyes raised slightly. "No one will be sad forever. I think you're very easy to coax. Compared to being forgotten as a stranger, it's better to be hated for the rest of your life." How domineering. I'm not easy to coax. Begonia bit her lips, but her eyes were filled with joy. Is that so? Li Qingshan held her face and leaned over to kiss her lips. She did not resist and let the tip of his tongue open her pearly white teeth. She even took the initiative to respond with her fragrant tongue. Her delicate body leaned softly in his arms, and her plump breasts rose slightly. When their lips parted, a strand of saliva flowed out. Li Qingshan smiled and said, "Isn't this easy to coax?" Begonia turned around. "I want a drink. You still want a drink?" Li Qingshan smiled bitterly. Although he liked to drink, the number of times he drank tonight was a little too much. "What, you don't want to?" Chapter 698. Li Qingshan smiled and gently touched her rosy lips. Begonia immediately understood what he meant. Since they could kiss, then feeding him wine was not a big deal. However, she knew very well that if they really used that kind of drinking method, it was impossible for the two of them to sit opposite to each other. She had to sit in his arms. It was simply impossible to expect him to behave himself. Her face turned red. "With your alcohol tolerance, wouldn't that exhaust me to death? Are you just going to say yes or no?" Li Qingshan smiled and pressed against her forehead. Hearing that she had loosened up, how could he not take advantage of the situation? "You have to promise me one thing. You are not allowed to touch me." If it was a normal day, Begonia would never agree to such an excessive request. However, after what happened tonight, she longed for his hug and intimacy. As her eyes moved, she was also secretly planning something. For the first time in her life, she was ready to really sell her body. "Okay, no problem." Li Qingshan immediately agreed. Qiu Haitang hesitated for a while before finally agreeing. Li Qingshan was overjoyed. In the past year, although he had come to the bottom of the lake many times, it was mainly to talk about love. Instead, he could not be as intimate as before. He immediately hugged her slender waist and held her in his arms. The warm and soft body in his arms seemed to melt. Begonia hugged his neck and moved her body, adjusting to a comfortable position. Her plump and round buttocks gently rubbed a few times. Li Qingshan immediately felt a surge of heat in his lower abdomen, and a certain part of his body changed. Begonia's body stiffened. She hurriedly lifted her body and stared at Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan spread out his hands and said, "This is not my hands and feet. If I hugged you like this and did not have the slightest reaction, then I am not a man. You are not a man in the first place." Begonia fiercely sat down, wanting to teach him a lesson. Li Qingshan sucked in a breath of cold air, but not because of the pain. His physique was strong, and it encompassed all parts of his body. She only felt that she had sunk into a ball of softness, and the joy was indescribable. On the other hand, Begonia frowned. She couldn't do anything to him, but seeing that he was attracted and tempted by her, she couldn't help but feel a little proud. "Where's my wine?" Li Qingshan moved closer to her face and licked his lips. "I want to drink 3 glasses in a row." Begonia took out several jars of wine from her 100 treasures pouch. After opening the seal, a ray of spiritual light shot out, and the fragrance of wine permeated the air. It was extremely strong. As soon as Li Qingshan smelled it, he knew it was the strongest wine. The smell was vaguely familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had drunk it before. He asked, "What kind of wine is this?" "1,000 days intoxication." 1,000 days intoxication. Li Qingshan suddenly remembered that when he participated in the entrance examination for the 100 schools of thought, he had made a bet with the sloppy Taoist Zhou Tong and drank a jar of his 1,000 days intoxication. That was why he couldn't wake up and had no choice but to enter the school of novels. He didn't expect that he would have to drink it again today. Begonia's eyes flickered slightly. "You've drunk it before?" Li Qingshan said. "I've only heard of it. I don't know if I'll really be drunk for 1,000 days after drinking it. I don't really believe it." "Then try it." Begonia smiled as she poured him a glass of wine. She brought it to his mouth. Li Qingshan tightly closed his lips, refusing to drink it. Begonia had no choice but to first hold the wine in her mouth, then straightened her body and brought it to his lips. Her cheeks were slightly puffed up, as if she had applied a layer of rouge, making her look incomparably beautiful. Begonia leaned forward, and Li Qingshan leaned back. When she moved to the left, he moved to the right. Their ears and temples rubbed against each other. Seeing that the mouthful of wine was about to melt in her mouth, she angrily pounced on him, sending the wine into his mouth. When she wanted to separate, she couldn't do so. Li Qingshan hugged her tightly, caressing her back and sucking on her fragrant tongue. Her ample breasts were pressed tightly against his chest, and he could clearly feel the softness and fullness of them through the thin muslin clothes. It really is a good wine. Using each other's lips as cups, they drank cup after cup. It didn't take long for several jars of Thousand Days, drunk to be almost finished. This wine was indeed intoxicating. Li Qingshan had drunk 3 cups in a row, and he didn't like to use his demonic energy to refine the wine, so he was also 70 to 80% drunk. But this time, he didn't feel sleepy at all. Instead, his desire grew stronger, and he licked and kissed her slender white neck. At the same time, he had long forgotten the promise of not touching her, and gently caressed her delicate body. You don't. Although Begonia drank less, her cheeks were still red, and her eyes were blurred. She collapsed in his arms. Don't what? Li Qingshan smiled and gently stroked her soft breasts. Don't abandon me. I won't. Begonia obediently did not resist. Only when he tried to reach under her clothes did she grab his hand and stop him. It wasn't because she was drunk, but because she had long regarded him as her beloved. This body was born for him, and she enjoyed his tenderness. It was only because of her shyness and the little thoughts of a woman that she refused to let him have his way too quickly. Li Qingshan understood where her boundaries were, so he didn't force her. His big hands squeezed her plump breasts through her clothes, making them change into various shapes in his hands. Her eyes were slightly closed, and her beautiful face seemed to be drunk, but not drunk. The corners of her eyes and brows changed slightly with his movements from time to time. She was shy and calm, knowing that she had opened her body and mind to him. Suddenly, he felt a little firmness emerge from the softness, and he gently pinched it with his thumb and index finger. Chiu Haitang let out a soul-stirring moan and opened her eyes to glare at him. However, she could only resign herself to his unscrupulous actions. Li Qingshan's heart moved, and he took out another jar of wine and brought it to her mouth. Begonia opened her mouth to drink, but the wine jar was tilted too much. The clear and transparent wine flowed down her lips, flowing down her slender neck, flowing over her full breasts, and flowing down her smooth belly. Wherever the wine went, her hot skin felt a cooling sensation. By the time she returned to her senses, the jar of alcohol had already dried up. Li Qingshan casually tossed it aside. Chapter 699. The endless autumn. Rain gradually turned into drifting snow, drifting across the entire lake of dragons and snakes. Clumps of snow bamboo stood proudly on Cloudwisp Island. In the pure white world, they seemed even taller and more verdant. Li Qingshan leaned against the fire and sat in the bamboo loft. He held a cup of hot tea with both hands as he faced the small lake in the center of the island. He watched as the snow rustled down, landing on the frozen surface of the lake. He murmured to himself, water and fire, water and fire. After spending another few months, he clearly felt like he had grasped the crux, but there was a barrier he was unable to break through. This feeling was not very satisfying. He took a sip of hot tea. He could not help but admit that cultivation really was the most time-consuming, which was why both demons and humans required a lifespan of hundreds or even thousands of years to overcome these obstacles. It was unrealistic to try and achieve everything in one go. If he became impatient, it would instead be detrimental to cultivation. He began practicing the arts of the boundless ocean. The ocean pearl revolved, and waves of spiritual chi surged out, flowing through his body and producing a sound like the tides of the ocean. Before the previous wave had even subsided, another wave would rise up incessantly. After over a year of cultivation, the ocean pearl had already completely stabilized. His sea of consciousness had become even more powerful, and the arcane artifacts on him had all multiplied in power. Coupled with the demon suppression statuary that grew more powerful as his demon heart strengthened, he could go anywhere in the world even without the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine. However, going from early golden core to mid-golden core was no easy feat. Having reached this step, whether it was his human or demon cultivation, the time it would take would be calculated in years. Unfortunately, he could not use the water god's seal right now, mobilizing the spiritual chi of water across the entire Rui commandery for cultivation. Otherwise, it would be much faster. All he had to do was break through to Demon Commander. Only then would he possess enough strength to face the Dragon King of the Sea and get out of this predicament. There was a flash from the corner of Li Qingshan's eye, and a streak of light tore through the air, passing through the snow. It landed on the frozen surface of the lake. Bang! The surface of the ice trembled and cracked. Snow flew into the air. In tight clothes, Han Qiongji had a blade on her waist, making her seem valiant and heroic. "Qiongji, why have you come? If you don't come looking for me, can I come looking for you?" Han Qiongji glanced around. He feigned surprise and said, Why isn't Parlor Master Li having fun in the Parlor of Clouds and Rain? You're drinking tea in this remote place by yourself. No flowers, no wine. That's not your style. Isn't it easy to get beauties? Don't look down on the school of novels. Li Qingshan smiled. With a snap of his fingers, a beauty of unparalleled beauty went from vague to vivid, materializing from intangible. She appeared in front of Li Qingshan and looked at Han Qiongji provocatively. She was so arrogant that no one could tell that she was transformed by the divine talisman of great creation. Clang! An arc of light flashed, and a wave of air pushed the snowflakes toward Li Qingshan. Han Qiongji snorted coldly and sheathed her saber. A thin line of blood appeared on the beautiful woman's neck. The expression of shock and fear on her face was vivid and lifelike, causing people to involuntarily feel a sense of pity. Fortunately, there was no terrifying scene of a head falling to the ground. Instead, it turned from thick to thin, turning real to illusory. Li Qingshan touched the tip of his nose. The saber had just passed right in front of his eyes. He patted the spot beside him and said, "Don't just stand there like a fool." He also felt somewhat fortunate that they were not in the Parlor of Clouds and Rain, and the person beside him was not Ling Long otherwise. Although he would not have slashed at her, he would definitely have lost his temper. "You're the fool." Han Qiongji sat down beside him as she said that, but she remained quite a distance away. Only when Li Qingshan opened his arms and pulled her into his embrace and kissed her gently on the head did her displeasure melt away. She leaned into his embrace quietly and gazed at the drifting snow, silently anticipating the grand wedding. Over the past year, they had finally stopped spending more time apart than together. In particular, when she emerged from seclusion after refining the virtue accumulation pill, they had spent a total of 3 months together. Apart from their daily cultivation, they basically spent all their time together. They wandered about the landscape as if they had returned to the days when they were passionately in love. Afterwards, Li Qingshan discovered that spending too much time together was not always a good thing. No matter how passionately in love, there would be a time when it would cool down. Han Qiongji emerged from the haze of the past, or in other words, she had calmed down from love. She really did have a rather violent temper. There was a period of time when she was basically moody. She would even say something like, "If you don't like me, then cancel the engagement and go marry the woman you like," out of anger. Li Qingshan could understand her uneasiness, his many secrets, and how he did whatever he wanted made her uneasy. She was afraid that Han Anjuan's prophecy would come true. At a time like this, he was instead unable to say any sweet nothings. All he could do was hug her firmly and unleash the patience of the spirit turtle. Only then did he survive the difficult period. Afterwards, when everything calmed down, Han Qiongji instead felt rather embarrassed. She pinched his cheek and said, "It's best if we don't spend too much time together in the future. You seem cute, but you really are quite annoying if you spend too much time together." "I think so too." Before Li Qingshan could finish his sentence, he felt his neck tighten. A pair of white hands grabbed him tightly. Han Qiongji said viciously, "Am I annoying?" By the way, when the two of them were talking, Han Qiongji was riding on top of Li Qingshan fiercely. The two of them were naked and looking at each other openly. Faced with such a naked threat, Li Qingshan could only surrender. He shook his head forcefully, and Han Qiongji let go of his neck in satisfaction. "That's more like it." In the next moment, Li Qingshan turned around and became the master. So-called cultivation companions were people who could help each other with their cultivation. If this condition was met, even two men could become cultivation companions and cultivate together. Chapter 700. This fellow Ruexan really is getting more and more beautiful. Han Qiongji could not help but sigh. Even though she was not a meticulous person, she could sense the wondrous tacit understanding between the two of them, which made her feel rather jealous. However, Ruexan was extremely calm. She instead refused to lose her temper, which made her seem petty. Li Qingshan gazed at the glass bottle in his hand. Although he had never said a single sweet word to this female friend of his, and they had spent most of the time cursing each other, their relationship was extraordinarily deep. As long as she said a single word, he would be willing to go through fire and water for her. He was originally a man who loved fine alcohol and beautiful women, a man who did not hide his desires. However, when he was with a beauty like her, he rarely felt any lust. He could not help but be described as an anomaly. Han Qiongji said, "What? Are you still reluctant to part with me?" "Forever. What's there to be reluctant about?" Li Qingshan stowed the medicine away carefully and stood up. He laughed aloud. "Just now, you dare to look down on your husband. I'll let you taste your husband's power today." He carried Han Qiongji and made his way into the bamboo loft. However, Han Qiongji broke free from his embrace. "I don't want to. You can deal with it yourself with the techniques of the school of novels." Li Qingshan pushed her onto the bamboo floor and smiled. "That's not up to you." Han Qiongji looked at him and said, "You better try out the effects of the medicine quickly. I still have missions from the Hawkwolf Guard to complete." Li Qingshan was taken aback. Ever since he obtained the medicine, he had been eager to try it out. He wanted to see whether he could break through the final barrier and reach Demon Commander. This desire was so intense that it definitely surpassed all other desires. However, Han Qiongji had come all the way here to see him, so he could not just leave her here. He had to get along with her properly, but he never thought she would actually see through him. "Just do what you need to do. Do you think I'll be happy just because you've been perfunctory with me? When doing that kind of thing, being half-hearted is the most annoying. Forever and ever. There's no need to rush. Cultivation is more important." Han Qiongji thought to herself, "I may not be able to help you much, but I will never be an obstacle in your path of cultivation." "Thank you." Li Qingshan held her face and kissed her deeply. Then he smiled and said, "I'll spare your life today. Next time, I'll make you beg for mercy." Han Qiongji blushed and said, "Don't even think about it." Her voice turned gentle. "After you finish your cultivation, don't forget to look for me, or else He watched as Han Qiongji disappeared into the horizon. Li Qingshan returned to Qin Zhao's cave, took out the bottle of light red liquid, and stared at it for a while. He felt a little strange. Since the legendary flower of water and fire doesn't exist, where did this potion come from? Even though Zhang Xian did not know much about alchemy, regardless of whether it was a pill or a potion, it was not like water without a source or a tree without roots. It was necessary to fuse the medicinal properties of some medicinal herbs together. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't come to a conclusion. "I'll just ask her the next time I see her." Li Qingshan opened the bottle and drank it all in one gulp. The taste was vaguely familiar, but before he could taste it carefully, the light red liquid spread throughout his body. After a slight refinement, it immediately turned into a strange medicinal property. Trying to absorb it into the demon core, Li Qingshan's eyes suddenly flashed with a hint of joy. He held his breath, and all the muscles in his body tensed up. It really worked. He saw that the conflict between the two powers that were originally like fire and water, the spirit turtle and phoenix that could not fuse with each other, gradually eased up. Although it was still far from fusion, to him, all that was missing was this final step. That thin membrane was finally pierced through. As if a small gap had appeared in the cloudy sky, a dazzling ray of light descended from the sky, passing through Li Qingshan's head. In that moment, the arduous comprehensions he had comprehended over the past year all surged through his head. The problem that had troubled him for so long had been resolved. Li Qingshan riled up with vigor. He closed his eyes and began a new round of cultivation. Time passed by quickly. When the ice river thawed and the earth returned to spring, deep in the endless earth, amidst the rolling magma, the mirror avatar suddenly turned into a pool of flowing water and evaporated into a cloud of mist in the blazing magma. This also meant that Li Qingshan needed to focus all of his attention on breaking through. In the Qing Shao dwelling, he opened his eyes. He was rather exhausted, but most of it was relief and joy. He said quietly, "It's time." The spirit turtle's method of sea suppression and the phoenix's scripture of Nerva began circulating at the same time. The two of them could be described as the foundations of the demon core. Originally, if Li Qingshan wanted to practice either one, he would have to suppress the other. Only now could he do it. This was the first time he had circulated both of them at the same time, so it would definitely lead to the most intense conflict between the two powers. The demon core revolved, shining with azure and scarlet light at the same time. The azure light was vast and vast, containing a sense of peace and tranquility. Although the scarlet light was much smaller, it was endless, as if it would never be extinguished. Sure enough, the two powers collided violently. The two lights became even more dazzling. They were both so pure that they could not tolerate any other power, let alone the fact that they were polar opposites. The spirit turtle wanted to suppress the phoenix to the very depths of the ocean instinctively and extinguish the final sliver of its flames. However, the phoenix refused to back down either. It burned fiercely, as if it wanted to boil the ocean dry and burn the spirit turtle to death. Li Qingshan controlled the two powers carefully. He could not let the spirit turtle defeat the phoenix in a single blow, nor could he let the phoenix gain the upper hand. He did his best to balance the two powers so that it would be difficult to determine who was stronger for a moment. In the intense clash, the two lights crisscrossed, gradually showing signs of merging. This was the result of a year of arduous cultivation, as well as thanks to Ru Xian's bottle of medicine, which saved him a tremendous amount of time. Li Qingshan knew that this was the most critical moment. Success or failure depended on this. Suddenly, he released his suppression on the spirit turtle and pushed the first layer of the phoenix's scripture of Nerva to the limit. There was a great rumble in Li Qingshan's head, causing it to ring. 2 different colors filled his heart. Behind him, the phoenix's wings suddenly unfurled to the limit. It let out an extremely beautiful phoenix cry almost subconsciously. The phoenix broke free from the spirit turtle's suppression and spread its wings. The spirit turtle seemed to recognize this power too, no longer suppressing it. Li Qingshan returned to his senses and was overjoyed. He withdrew all of the light back into his demon core. The 2 powers were no longer as distinct as before. Instead, they were both in each other like a red and blue taiji ball that constantly revolved. After going through numerous difficulties and obstacles, only now did he truly complete the first layer of the phoenix's scripture of Nerva. He possessed the right to use the phoenix's ability, but he had yet to fully comprehend what the phoenix's ability was. His demon chi almost lost control, surging out violently. If it were not for the suppression of the 8 gates formation of golden locks, it almost would have reached the clouds. He could clearly see the ripples on the surface of the lake before passing through the surface and checking at the bottom. Li Qingshan raised his left hand, and another piece of the spirit turtle's profound shell appeared. It also reflected an image, but it reflected a region of water in Calmwave Lake. He began his search. Pieces of the spirit turtle's profound shell appeared around him, forming a vague spherical shape. It reflected different images, like monitors displaying the scenery of different places. Standing in the middle, Li Qingshan felt like everything was under his control. This was the spirit turtle's new innate ability. The profound light illuminates all. This ability was rather similar to the water mirror disc. There were techniques with the same effects in the cultivation community, but the effects were worlds apart. The water mirror disc could survey the entire 100 schools of thought at most. Even with the water god seal, it could only survey Mooncourt Lake at most. If he used techniques alone, the range would be even smaller. However, if Li Qingshan needed the profound light illuminates all, he could concentrate all of his power on a piece of the spirit turtle's profound shell, and he could even see the scenery from 1,000 kilometers away, down to the finest detail. It was basically like a spy satellite from his past life. It already possessed strategic significance, and he had only grasped this ability to a basic level right now. Once he mastered it, the effects should be even greater. He even fantasized about a day when he could take in the entire 9 provinces just by sitting in his dwelling, just like how a shut-in knew everything in the world without going out. Speaking of which, this nerdy otaku was really like a tortoise. In order to avoid all kinds of dangers, he locked himself at home and stared at the screen every day. As for his character in the game, his personality in the forum was like a mirror image of himself. Suddenly, Li Qingshan's gaze stopped on a piece of the spirit turtle's profound shell. He smiled, revealing 2 sharp canine teeth. Chapter 702. Finding this unknown enemy was much easier than Li Qingshan had originally anticipated. Through the illumination of mystic light illumination, in the deep waters of Tranquil Wave Lake sat a magnificent palace. Numerous aquatic demons swam around it as if they were guards. It seemed to be orderly and had quite a grand atmosphere. Li Qingshan was secretly amazed. He really was a demon commander from the Ink Sea after all. He sure knew how to play around. He just wondered how strong he was. He was basically certain that the Dragon King of the Sea had sent a water demon commander. He was probably much more powerful than the demon commanders in the Rui Commandery, but that was not enough for him to worry about. The only thing he had to worry about was the water god seal in his possession that represented control over almost half of the water in the Rui commandery. Not only could it provide him with endless demon chi, but the power of his abilities and techniques would definitely increase drastically too. It was exactly because of this that it was very unlikely for him to return to the water obediently. As a demon, he still had to speak with strength at the end of the day. Li Qingshan could have used the water god seal in his possession to mobilize the water and launch a large-scale attack. However, if two powerful demons who each controlled half of the water in the Rui commandery fought, the water would probably spread for thousands of kilometers. Countless lives would be lost to them. He was not some kind-hearted person, but he did not want to drag in the innocent unless he had no other choice. Not to mention, there was no need for him to mobilize so many people just to deal with a demon commander. He could just find the target and directly take him down. When he tried to take a look at the situation in the palace, the image froze, blocked by a flexible force. As it turned out, a hemispherical screen of light enveloped the palace. Profound light illuminates combine. Li Qingshan brought his fingers together like a sword and pointed at the piece of the spirit turtle's profound shell that reflected the palace. The other pieces of spirit turtle's profound shell all flew and overlapped, forming a hexagonal cylinder. The image that had been stagnant suddenly moved forward and showed the inside of the palace. Clearly reflecting the scene inside, Li Qingshan was surprised again. They're actually holding a banquet. 7 or 8 guests sat down. There were men and women among them, and they all differed in appearance. There were quite a few faces that Li Qingshan was familiar with. They were all demon commanders he had defeated in the past, these unruly demon commanders. Now, every one of them behaved themselves and used the chopsticks in their hands uncomfortably. Li Qingshan snickered in his heart. Back then, he had been able to defeat them all by himself. Now, he paid even less attention to these demon commanders. His gaze quickly gathered on the main seat. A green-skinned, square-faced, ugly man sat there with a wine cup in his hand. He looked around arrogantly and emitted an extraordinary aura. That was the aura of an expert. Li Qingshan knew. This was the enemy they had to deal with this time. The hideous man frowned. He turned his head and scanned the surroundings as if he had sensed something. "You're quite sharp." Li Qingshan chuckled. She was still sizing him up unscrupulously. The ugly man had a puzzled look on his face. Just now, he suddenly felt that someone was watching him, but after carefully checking, he didn't find any signs of it. Thinking that no one could enter this palace without making a sound, he slightly relaxed. "I hope Big Brother Shah can unify all the water regions of the Rui commandery soon and utterly defeat that bastard North Moon so that he can chase him out of the Rui commandery." A plump man stood up and raised his cup. He was the bullfrog demon commander that Li Qingshan had once taught a vicious lesson to. Just chasing him out of the Rui commandery isn't enough. We have to rip off all of his limbs and feed them to Big Brother Shah. An old man immediately followed up. His face was filled with hatred. Ripping off his limbs isn't enough. We have to dig out his demon core for Big Brother Shah to nourish so that Big Brother Shah can become a demon king sooner. No, we can't spare his life. We have to rip him to pieces. We'll each take a piece and have a taste of his flesh and blood. I want to eat his brain. I want to eat his heart. When they mentioned the name North Moon, the demons all became vicious. They all spoke up, each more vicious than the last. In just a while, they had already carved up every single piece of North Moon's flesh. 2 demon commanders even fought over his heart, almost flipping over the table. One of them had never even clashed with North Moon before. Li Qingshan's eyes widened as his face reddened. He tried to hold it back again and again, but He could not hold it back anymore. With a spurt, he collapsed on the cloud as he clutched his stomach and began laughing aloud. With the likes of you trash, you're more like eating my big bird. If it weren't for the sake of the Dragon King of the Sea, I would have skinned you all alive a long time ago. With the pleasure of peeping, Li Qingshan was in no hurry to fight. He wanted to see what other jokes these guys could come up with. At the same time, Big Brother Sha also laughed aloud. Thank you for your kind words, brothers. However, I'm here on behalf of the Dragon King to invite that bastard North Moon to the Ink Sea. There's really no need to fight and kill. Big Brother Sha, how can we do this? We still need you to avenge us. Don't be hasty. Let me finish. However, this also depends on whether that North Moon is tactful or not. If he's willing to hand over the Water God's seal, then it's fine. If he's unwilling, then we'll teach him a lesson. However, according to the Dragon King's orders, as fellow demons, we are not allowed to kill each other. At most, we'll chop off his limbs and take his demon core. Big Brother Sha changed the topic. A hint of viciousness flashed in his beady eyes. Ever since he obtained the Water God's seal, he felt that his cultivation speed had increased a lot. If this continued, he might be able to become a demon king in less than 2 centuries. He became even more envious of the Water God's seal in North Moon's possession. Although he had heard about North Moon's glorious accomplishments as a demon commander directly under the Dragon King of the Sea, his strength could not be compared to these local demon commanders. Now that he had almost half of the waters of the Rui Commandery as his foundation, coupled with the assistance of these demon commanders, he did not need to fear North Moon if they actually began fighting. Just like its name, it could control gravity within a certain range. It could make something as light as a feather or as heavy as a mountain. The reason why Li Qingshan could fall at such a startling speed was because of the powerful gravity. As long as they lived on the ground, no life or object could escape this power. What attacked Big Brother Sha was the endless earth, or in other words, a weight that he could not endure. Big Brother Sha felt an intense sense of danger, as if disaster was descending from the sky. He reacted extremely quickly, transforming into a huge, green sand turtle. He immediately felt much more at ease. He was extremely confident in the defenses of his shell. Out of his 3 great innate abilities, the strongest one was his shell. At that moment, all the demon commanders felt a tremendous demon chi descend from the sky. Before they could even react, a scarlet light flashed through their eyes. Only when Li Qingshan's fist landed on the shell did he pause slightly. He grinned. The unforgettable scarlet hair and scarlet eyes made the demons cry out involuntarily, "North Moon!" Soon afterwards, the surging lake water surged over and sent them flying. The magnificent palace at the bottom of the lake was immediately reduced to pieces, swept away in all directions. The banquet was over. Chapter 703. Many people passed by the lakeside of Calm Wave Lake in the midst of spring. There were young masters and young ladies on a spring outing, as well as merchants and peddlers busy with their livelihood. The ground suddenly shook. Many people lost their footing and rolled on the ground. A small carriage almost fell into the lake. What's going on? Is it an earthquake? Someone pointed at the sky and asked in surprise, "What's that?" Everyone in the surroundings looked over. All they saw was a straight streak of scarlet light piercing through the sky and disappearing into the horizon. Someone said it was a meteor, but it was immediately rebutted. How could there be a meteor with such a trajectory? As they discussed, a great sound rang out from afar. Because it was too far away, the sound was not particularly shocking. Then, everyone saw that where the scarlet light pierced through, the layers of clouds were swept away, faintly forming a circular hole. A thin white line rose up from the horizon. rapidly approaching a terrifying wave that no one had ever seen before. It surged over like a tsunami. Everyone cried out and scattered in all directions. At the center of Calm Wave Lake, the lake water several dozen meters deep was parted viciously, forming a huge crater in the water. At the bottom of the crater, Li Qingshan landed a punch on Sha Bi's shell. The shell flashed with light, and a totem-like pattern appeared. It was filled with a primitive, simple, and indestructible will. This was Sha Bi's innate ability that he was most proud of. He was not a divine beast, like the spirit turtle, but his shell was his life-bound item. After cultivating it for 1,000 years, he did not hold back on his demon chi, pushing his innate ability to the limit. If he wanted to kill him, he would have to break this turtle shell, but unless he exhausted all his demonic chi, his turtle shell would not be broken. Now that he had the water god's seal in his body, his demonic chi was endless, and he was in an invincible position, unless a demon king intervened, using overwhelming power to break his turtle shell. But how could a mere demon general do it? Crack! There was the sound of something shattering. Sha Bi felt a sharp pain on his back. His eyes bulged. Impossible! Under Li Qingshan's punch, the totem twisted and shattered in the blink of an eye. It was an indestructible turtle shell. The indestructible shell was even dented and cracked like paper. Having cultivated to the 5th layer of the ox demon, he could contend with a corpse king in terms of strength. When he transformed into a demon commander, he grew to 120 meters tall. Just how powerful would it be? When this power descended from the sky, with the support of its terrifying speed, just how powerful would it be? How could a demon commander possibly withstand all of this combined? What if he included Li Qingshan's strongest attack? His fist was pitch black in color, and layers of the tremors of the ox demon wrapped around it. This move had once caused the Corpse King to suffer a grudge, and now it had become even more fatal. In Li Qingshan's eyes, the so-called powerful defense and invincible land were just 4 words: clay chickens and pottery dogs. Li Qingshan directly penetrated through Sha Bi's huge body. The vibration force tore his flesh inch by inch, crushing his last fighting will. A tsunami-like wave, blocked by the mountains and islands on Tranquil Wave Lake. By the time it reached the lakeside, its momentum was already much weaker. It was still several feet high, slamming heavily on the lake embankment. The power of a single strike was actually enough to shake up the greatest lake in the Rui Commandery. It only calmed down after quite a while. Regular people thought it was the might of the heavens, but the cultivators who cultivated near Tranquil Wave Lake were all dumbfounded as they shivered inside. Chapter 704. The haunt ghosts did not possess much battle prowess, but their minds had been subdued by the tiger demon's ability, so they were absolutely loyal. This meant that not only could Li Qingshan kill people, but he could even enslave the people he killed, preventing them from reincarnating in the netherworld. Moreover, the ghosts would definitely tell him everything they knew, so it was best to use them to probe for secrets. Since Sha came from the Ink Sea, he should know the situation there. Now that he had started a massacre, he would definitely offend the Dragon King of the Sea. It was perfect for Li Qingshan to understand the situation of the Ink Sea from him, so that he could respond appropriately. Li Qingshan was indeed fearful of the Dragon King of the Sea, but that did not mean just anyone could use this to threaten him. He had grown accustomed to being on equal footing with the Golden Cicada Spirit King and the Banyan Tree King, so he really did not want to lower himself and visit some Sir Dragon King. He had already fallen out with that bullshit Beast King, so there was no harm in offending another one. Looking at the haunt ghosts Sha Bi had transformed into, Li Qingshan felt some pity. If only he had possessed this ability a long time ago. It would have been extremely pleasant to lead a group of enemies in conquering the world. He abruptly turned his head and sensed that waves of demonic aura were leaving Calm Wave Lake. Those guests who wanted to divide and eat him were fleeing in all directions. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Since he had come this far, he might as well go all the way. Back then, he had been forced by the circumstances to spare their lives, which had already made Li Qingshan rather unhappy. Now that they were here to discuss how to deal with him, they could all go die. Casually tossing Sha Bi's haunt ghosts into the Azura field, Li Qingshan turned into a scarlet streak of light and arrived high in the sky. He swung his right hand. Profound light illuminates all. Pieces of the spirit turtle's profound shell flew out, shining in the direction the demon chi had fled in. Very soon, they locked onto all the fleeing figures. Li Qingshan chose the one closest to him. With a flap of his wings, he kicked up flames and shot off as a scarlet streak of light. In the ink sea, there was a majestic hall with many lamps. It was like a Buddhist hall, but there was no Buddha statue. One of the lamps suddenly went out. This was not an ordinary oil lamp, but a life lamp. The extinguished lamp belonged to Sha Bi, who was killed by Li Qingshan. What? Lao Sha is dead. Mou hurried over, a trace of shock appearing on his usually expressionless face. Who would be so bold as to kill someone from the ink sea? Lao Sha wasn't someone who would be killed so easily. He suddenly thought of a possibility, and his face became even paler. He turned into a black vortex and disappeared from the palace. In the depths of the ink sea, there was a huge dragon that was as black as ink. It was heavy and dignified like a mountain, agile and elegant like clouds. In comparison, the black dragon that Si Qing transformed using the Black Emperor Dragon Mantra was like a small snake. It did not feel like a life form at all. The Dragon King of the Sea opened his eyes. After a moment, he slowly closed them again. Boom! A huge bullfrog the size of a small mountain landed heavily on the shore of Calm Wave Lake, crushing countless houses and buildings and causing countless people to scream. However, the bullfrog had no time to pay attention to the ants around it. It pushed off with its hind legs, digging 2 deep pits in the ground, and leapt forward with all its might. In an instant, it left the lakeside. Its huge and heavy body could advance over 10 kilometers with each leap. In just a few moments, it was more than 100 kilometers away from the palace in the center of the lake. At this moment, he was filled with regret. He should not have been invited to that banquet. He had personally witnessed North Moon's ferocity. It was not something that he could resist. Moreover, just now, with a quick glance, he discovered something even more astonishing. The aura that North Moon gave off clearly indicated that he had already undergone the second heavenly tribulation and become a demon commander. Demon commanders were nothing. He himself was a demon commander. However, North Moon was a terrifying existence that could defeat a large group of demon commanders when he was a demon general. Now that he had become a demon commander, just how powerful would he be? If that attack had landed on him, he would have already been turned into a pile of meat paste. He regretted that he had been stunned for a moment and had run a little too slowly. At this moment, a huge wave of demon chi rapidly approached. Greatly alarmed, the bullfrog ran even faster. However, in the blink of an eye, that wave of demon chi had arrived above his head. The first one. Li Qingshan flapped his wings, and like an eagle swooping down on a rabbit, he lunged at the bullfrog. By the time he reached the ground, he had already reverted to his original form. He had turned into a giant that was nearly 120 meters tall. Compared to him, the bullfrog's huge body seemed small. The bullfrog used all his strength to leap forward. Suddenly, his body became 10 times heavier, and he fell from the sky. Before he could react, a hoof of the bullfrog had already stomped him into the ground. The powerful force An enormous gravity made him unable to move. He was like a little frog under the claws of a ferocious tiger. Fellow Taoist, spare me. I had already spared you once, but since you refuse to repent, you might as well die, Li Qingshan said. Under the tiger's claws, he easily ripped apart the bullfrog's body, killing him on the spot. He dug out a demon core and had the spirit turtle suppress it. Then he tossed the body into the Azura field, preparing to make a fried bullfrog for himself. A demon commander who had cultivated for many years like this should taste quite good. When he thought of Sha Bi, he felt some regret. If he had known earlier, he would not have shattered him so much. Otherwise, he would have left him to stew in soup. It would probably have been even more nourishing. In the end, he turned his soul into a haunt. Anyway, it was not wasted at all. Afterwards, the scarlet light took off once again, falling towards the next fleeing demon commander. With his speed that far exceeded regular demon commanders, and the profound light illuminates all's lock onto him, Li Qingshan killed all the demon commanders who wanted to eat him, turning them all into haunt ghosts. He obtained another 8 demon cores, 5 of which were water elemental. Sha Bi was worried that the North Moon would use the water god seal to attack from the north, so he purposefully befriended these water elemental demon commanders. He never expected the development of the situation to be completely different from what he had anticipated. In the end, it all ended up benefiting Li Qingshan. However, right now, Li Qingshan primarily practiced the Phoenix's scripture of Nerva, so these demon cores were temporarily useless. He tossed them all into his 100 treasures pouch for the future. After doing all that, Li Qingshan returned to Calmwave Lake and took out the water god seal he had stolen from Sha Bi. The original owner had been killed, so he easily suppressed and erased the remaining aura from the water god seal, uniting all the water in the Rui commandery once again. Afterwards, he merged the 2 water god seals together, forming an even more powerful water god seal that could hold even more water. With a thought, Li Qingshan gathered the surging water spiritual qi towards the water god seal in his hand before channeling it into the ocean pearl in his body. After reaching Golden Core, the rate at which he gathered spiritual qi had become even faster, but to the ocean pearl, it was utterly inadequate. It had always been empty. Now, with the water god seal, the emptiness in the ocean pearl was filled up very quickly, filling up sliver by sliver. Li Qingshan sighed inside. Sure enough, the spiritual qi required by Golden Core was tremendous. The amount of spiritual qi he had absorbed in a moment was enough for 10 first-layer qi practitioners to reach late foundation establishment. A while later, the ocean pearl suddenly lit up. It had finally filled up, although he had only filled up the ocean pearl like a force-fed duck right now, and he still needed a tremendous amount of time to refine the spiritual qi into his own power. This had saved him a tremendous amount of time. At the very least, he did not need to spend any effort gathering resources for practicing the arts of the boundless ocean for the next decade. Then, Li Qingshan did not stop gathering spiritual qi. He continued to absorb it continuously, replenishing the demonic qi he had lost in this battle to its perfect state. It was even more abundant than when he had first arrived. The light on the water god seal had dimmed a lot. The water spiritual qi contained in the rivers and lakes was not inexhaustible. It had been accumulated bit by bit over a long period of time. Ever since the great Xia dynasty's Shungzu emperor defeated all the deities, it had taken him thousands of years to accumulate such a huge amount of resources. In total, Li Qingshan had already used up 50 to 60% of it in the past. Sha Bi had never stopped absorbing spiritual qi during the past year, or so either. He had used up 10 to 20%, so only 20 to 30% remained. However, who knew how many pills and how much time he could save on cultivation with this 20 to 30%? Now that he had fallen out with the Dragon King of the Sea, it would be difficult for him to remain as the water god in peace. Naturally, he had to seize the time and pack up everything he could to prepare for the future. However, the remaining 20 to 30% of spiritual qi left Li Qingshan rather troubled. He thought, isn't there another place where I can store this water spiritual qi? He brought his fingers together like a sword and extended his hand, pointing at the azure field and drawing in all the surging water spiritual qi. The weather in the azure field changed drastically. Dark clouds filled the sky, enveloping a range of several hundred kilometers. The clouds grew thicker and thicker as rain poured down. However, it was not regular rain. Instead, it was spiritual rain filled with spiritual qi, like a sweet, sweet rain. The rain fell into the lake, and the water level skyrocketed. Chapter 705. P.S. This is a miracle. In order for the miracle to continue, comrades, let's start our monthly votes. The sun gradually disappeared, and the stars moved. On Calmwave Lake, two figures faced each other. One was blazing like fire, with a wanton smile on his face. The other was dark like a shadow, cold as if he was always wearing a mask. So, you're already a demon commander. Emoyu said stiffly. He was also filled with shock inside. North Moon had made a name for himself as a demon general, and he had become a demon commander now. Just how long had it taken him? 10 years? Or even less? For a human cultivator to have such a speed, it could be considered extremely fast, and for a demon, it was even more unbelievable. How is it? Scared out of your wits? Li Qingshan said with a smile. No wonder you're so bold. You know what kind of sin you've committed? Breaking the rules of peaceful coexistence set by the Dragon King, killing each other within the demon clan. Li Qingshan laughed. It's not the first time you've wanted to kill me, and now you're saying such ridiculous things. There's only one rule in the demon clan, and that's the law of the jungle. If you really want to distinguish right from wrong, then fine. I want to kill them because they want to kill me, and I want to kill you because you want to kill me. Kill me? Moyu's tone finally fluctuated, as if he had thought of something he had never thought of before. This was not because he was stupid, but because he had cultivated this habit for thousands of years. As the crown prince of the Qingzhou demon clan, no one had ever been able to threaten his life. Only he could determine the time of death of others. This time, when he came to Calmwave Lake and saw North Moon again, all he thought about was how to kill him and not let him escape. He had never thought about the possibility of being killed by him. After being reminded, he began to think. North Moon was already strong enough when he was a demon general. Now that he was a demon commander, what kind of power would he have? He could not help but regret not killing him quickly back then. But he had forgotten a problem. Even if he wanted to kill him, how could Li Qingshan obediently let him kill him? Yeah, don't forget, you still owe me a debt. It's about time you pay it back. Li Qingshan had once fought with Moyu. One of his innate abilities, the Deathbringer curse, had taken away 100 years of his lifespan. To Li Qingshan, this was not considered a long lifespan. But in the end, it was still extremely unpleasant. Moyu was silent for a long time before he calmly said, "You will die." It was as if he was announcing some kind of established fact. "I will die." To his surprise, Li Qingshan nodded and frankly admitted, everything in this world cannot escape the four words formation, steadiness, badness, and emptiness. Who dares to say that they will never die? However, you will definitely die before me. Speaking of which, he didn't say anything else. He waved his right hand downwards, and all of the ripples on the sparkling Calmwave Lake were instantly smoothed out. It was like a huge mirror, reflecting the ink-blue sky and the crescent moon on the horizon. Catoptric deflection. Li Qingshan's reflection in the lake suddenly moved as he leaped out of the water. When a lion hunts a rabbit, it uses all its strength. Moreover, Mou was not a rabbit. With his innate ability to freely travel through space, it was definitely not an easy task to kill him. In the past, he rarely used his mirror image doppelganger in battle. Only at certain critical moments would he use his mirror image doppelganger to launch a sneak attack. Because the mirror image doppelganger was too weak, it could basically only withstand 1 or 2 attacks. Moreover, in an intense battle, it was important to focus on it and not multitask. But at this time, after Li Qingshan had become a demon commander, these 2 problems had been solved. First, the mirror image doppelganger was no longer so weak. As Li Qingshan became stronger, it also rose. Then, Li Qingshan's divine sense also became stronger. His mind was strong enough to control 2 bodies at the same time to engage in battle. Thus, the mirror image doppelganger could finally fight side by side with him. The phoenix wings and the wind god wings opened at the same time. Li Qingshan and the mirror image doppelganger moved together, attacking Mou from both the sky and the lake. Mou also opened a pair of pitch-black wings, but these wings were not the same as the wings of a bird. Instead, they seemed to be formed from the interweaving of shadows. Under the night sky, they rapidly grew. In the blink of an eye, the wingspan had reached several dozen feet, as if wanting to cover the entire sky. It was filled with an ominous feeling. Black feathers fluttered in the air, drawing black trails. Under the cover of these wings, all the fish and shrimps in the lake died. Mou's eyes stared at Li Qingshan, his black pupils flowing like liquid, turning a sliver of white, filled with a strange horror. Gaze of death. Li Qingshan's figure paused. A cold chill instantly penetrated his skin, seeping into his organs and straight into his soul. If someone could see Li Qingshan's flame of life, they would see the flame fiercely flicker and dim. Mou's innate divine ability was indeed strange. It ignored the opponent's speed, strength, and defense, and directly attacked the opponent. Last time, Li Qingshan had suffered a loss under this move. Even with the endless phoenix flames, he was almost unable to resist this power of death. If not for Gu Yeniying's sudden appearance, bringing the Dragon King of the Sea's order to stop before going too far, his life would have been in danger. This time, Mou had used his full strength right from the start. Could Li Qingshan still withstand it? Li Qingshan's advancing speed gradually slowed down, finally stopping in front of Mou. His face was pale without a trace of blood. His heart seemed to have stopped beating, and the blazing phoenix wings behind him dimmed. The mirror image doppelganger lost the control of his will, and like a puppet with its strings cut, it fell onto the lake. Mou, who was in the center of the darkness, opened his mouth. "You have indeed become stronger, but this is meaningless to me. Do you think that when you die is up to you? When I say that you will die, I don't mean sometime in the future, but now." As he spoke, his shadow wings extended even more, like 2 pitch-black hands enveloping Li Qingshan. Mou stepped on a path formed from interweaving shadows, walking towards Li Qingshan. Facing the immobile Li Qingshan, he only needed to wave his hand lightly, and he could cut off his head. However, he did not notice that the corner of Li Qingshan's mouth was slightly raised. Even if he did notice, he would only think that it was a twitch of despair on the verge of death. The power of death was continuously invading Li Qingshan's body, wanting to cut off his life force. However, his flames of life were stronger than ever before, and the phoenix was no longer the phoenix that was suppressed by the spirit turtle. The Yao core spun, sending a warm current to his body, dispelling the chill of death. This was the endless power of the phoenix. Mou walked in front of Li Qingshan, preparing to cut off his head with a wave of his hand. Suddenly, He felt his body sink, as if there was a power that wanted to pull him down, and a warning sign appeared in his heart. Chapter 706. With Li Qingshan's great strength that rivaled that of a demon king, who could block a punch from him with their face. The vibrations shattered the air and produced a boom. His fist sank deeply into Mo's cheek. Bang! With a loud sound, Mo was sent flying, spinning. Just as Li Qingshan was about to give chase with a hideous smile, a darkness suddenly enveloped him. Although Mo had been sent flying, the pair of dark wings gripped him tightly, drowning him within. The moment the light disappeared, Li Qingshan saw that Mo's collapsed face did not reveal any flesh or bones. Instead, it was pitch black like flowing ink. He had originally thought that Mo's original form was a crow, but it did not seem that simple. Darkness surrounded him from all sides. Li Qingshan flapped his wings, but he felt like he was stuck in the same spot. It was like he had fallen into a black hole, cutting off all contact with the outside world. Only the aura of death permeated every pore. Is this also his fourth innate ability? And it's a variation of his original innate ability. As some bullshit crown prince, he really is something. Although Li Qingshan was surprised, he did not panic. Instead, he became rather excited. If Mo had been like Sha Bi, killed in a few punches and kicks, he would instead feel disappointed. Since this was an innate ability that isolated domains, he just happened to have an innate ability that could break through them. His fist slowly drew back and instantly struck the space in the most violent manner possible. In the sky above the mirror-smooth lake, a black egg floated quietly. Suddenly, the surface of the black egg bulged slightly and ripples spread out. With a crack appeared on the surface of the black egg. Soon afterwards, it cracked in another direction. Within the black egg, all directions were mixed up. Li Qingshan thought he was blasting in the same direction, but under Mo's control, he constantly changed the direction of his attacks. However, even with that being the case, it was only a matter of time before the black egg shattered. Mo's eyes narrowed slightly. No matter how powerful a demon commander was, it was only brute force. Once they were trapped in the black egg, they would be doomed. He never thought that Mo would be able to break through the black egg, and he seemed to be doing it with such ease. Mo took out a pitch-black bamboo flute, placed it by his lips, and played it slowly. However, it did not make a single sound, and the sound of the flute directly entered the black egg. Li Qingshan felt a chill run down his spine. The sound of the flute was dry and did not have any ups and downs. It was filled with a deathly stillness and numbness. It could no longer be described as unpleasant. Just listening to it for a while would make one feel depressed and bored. Even if he covered his ears, the sound of the flute would enter his heart along with the darkness and silence, slowly devouring his life force. Li Qingshan suddenly recalled that when he fought Mo the last time, he was roared at by Mo and lost 100 years of his lifespan. Even though the sound of the flute was very different from the cry of a crow, it was extremely similar in essence. The curse of death, Mo's most terrifying innate ability, also had many variations. With the aid of this pitch-black bamboo flute, its power was pushed to the extreme. Not only would it consume one's lifespan, it could also directly destroy the enemy's will to live. In an intense battle like this, the outcome of losing the will to live went without saying. In that moment, even Li Qingshan felt rather bored. The exhaustion and weakness of a dying old man filled his heart, but he immediately broke free from this emotion. He did not use the spirit turtle to suppress his thoughts, but his own willpower, drinking fine alcohol, sleeping with beautiful women, and fighting powerful enemies. Life was filled with great joy, fighting against the heavens, fighting against the earth, and fighting against people. It was endless joy. As a result, he swung his fists aloud. Boom, boom, boom. The black egg shattered loudly. He said to MOU, "You've used up all your tricks. Have you run out of tricks?" MOU's expression changed slightly. His ability was an ability that possessed overwhelming power, so when he encountered an enemy that he could not crush, he would actually become rather helpless. At this moment, the mirror clone lunged over from behind MOU and punched through him, but it was only an afterimage. MOU flapped his wings and took off. As a bird, he was startlingly fast, but he was cut off by a scarlet streak of light. At the end of the day, Li Qingshan still came out on top. Li Qingshan's black tiger digs out the heart mist. The force whistled through the air, carving out a great pit in the surface of the lake, kicking up a tremendous blast. MOU immediately vanished and appeared behind Li Qingshan, reaching towards his neck viciously. Originally, every time he moved, he would form a black vortex first. Looks like that's only possible when he teleports over long distances. In close combat like this, it's basically no different from teleportation. Just now, he's only taking my punch to trap me. It doesn't seem to do any harm to him. With a thought, a piece of the spirit turtle's profound shell flew out automatically, blocking MOU's attack. At the same time, he swept backwards with the wings of wind. MOU teleported again. In the night sky, a scarlet streak of light shot through the air, leaving behind dazzling trails. A black figure constantly flickered about, appearing abruptly and without any prior signs. For a moment, neither of them could do anything to the other. It was basically impossible for MOU to defeat Li Qingshan in close combat. His speed was already great, but the difference in strength was even greater. Even if Li Qingshan stood still and allowed him to hit him, he would struggle to rip through his ox hide or break his tiger bones. However, if Li Qingshan wanted to catch MOU, who constantly flickered about, it would not be easy either. "Haha, didn't you say I would die today? All you're doing is fleeing. How are you going to kill me?" Li Qingshan destroyed the blur. "MO, you left behind with a punch and mocked loudly. Didn't you also say I would die before you? Then come and kill me." MOU retorted sarcastically, "What a troublesome, innate ability. I need to find an opportunity to deal him a fatal blow. I refuse to believe that I can't kill you with 10 innate abilities." Just as Li Qingshan was considering a plan, a familiar voice rang out from the horizon. "Please pause for a moment and listen to me." Gu Yenying descended from the sky and created such a great disturbance on the ground of the Rui Commandery. As the White Hawk commander, she received the news very quickly and rushed over. "Yenying." MOU frowned slightly. It was exactly because of her appearance last time that he lost a fantastic opportunity to kill North Moon. Li Qingshan feigned displeasure. "Gu Yenying, what do you have to say?" But no matter what, they all stopped. Gu Yenying smiled gently. "Since neither of us can kill the other, let's stop for now. North Moon, you can continue cultivating. You'll definitely become stronger and stronger. MOU, you're not far from Demon King. So why don't you come for revenge then?" To Li Qingshan, as long as he had time, his strength would definitely grow faster than anyone else. If MOU could undergo the third heavenly tribulation, his strength would grow in an overwhelming manner. This suggestion seemed very reasonable. Li Qingshan raised an eyebrow. "Who says I can't kill him?" MOU said nothing. He did not feel like there was any possibility of him failing today. As long as he continued fighting, he would definitely be able to find an opportunity to deal a fatal blow to North Moon. And he still had a trump card that he had yet to use. "No matter who kills the other, I won't stop it. After all, this is your own will. But if you continue fighting, you'll all die. MOU, you'll die to North Moon, while North Moon, You'll be killed by the Dragon King. An outcome like this where you perish together isn't interesting at all. As a friend of both of you, I have the responsibility to prevent this from happening. Chapter 707. Li Qingshan and Mo's expressions froze when they heard this. Although they had not known Gu Yenying for the same period of time, they had a certain degree of trust in her. They had never said something so certain that they would definitely die. I've already said that you'll die before me. Even this woman doesn't think highly of you. Li Qingshan suddenly laughed, expressing his disdain towards Mo once again. Mo, you said indifferently, today, regardless of whether I live or die, you will definitely die. However, there's no need for the Dragon King to personally take action. They both disagreed with Gu Yenying's conclusion. Mo, you naturally did not think that he would die. On the contrary, he still had a backup plan. He was prepared to subdue and kill the North Moon. As long as he was not obstructed by Gu Yenying, Li Qingshan believed that after killing Mo, he only needed to conceal his presence and return to his post as the Scarlet Hawk commander. No matter how strong the Dragon King of the Sea was, where would he be able to find him? The only worry was that Gu Yenying would betray him. The two of them looked towards Gu Yenying at the same time. The determination in their eyes was self-evident. They wanted to continue this battle until life and death was decided. Foolish males. Gu Yenying sighed while rubbing her forehead. She shook her head and said, "All right, since you insist, I definitely won't interfere in this battle." Gu Yenying chose to retreat, leaving Calmwave Lake. She watched the battle from the Western Mountain Pavilion on the western shore of Calmwave Lake, expressing her absolute neutrality. As the White Hawk commander, she was originally overjoyed to see the two demon commanders fighting amongst themselves. She had already done her part by speaking up to stop them. "Sister, they're not willing to stop." Si Bao leaned on the railing in the Storm Pavilion and looked into the distance. She raised her thick brows slightly. A battle of this level was extremely rare in this era. This time, it's going to be a battle of life and death. Gu Yenying nodded. She had always been carefree and unrestrained. At this moment, his expression was very solemn. Although he had never intended to become a couple with anyone, the more friends he had, the more paths he could take. Whether it be Mo or Li Qingshan, they were both very important to her. "Sister, you don't have to worry. According to my observation, they can at most tie." He didn't need to use any divine abilities. Mo could not even harm a single hair on North Moon's head. It was truly a wonder how he cultivated. Now, he was actually already a demon commander. He's ridiculously strong. As for Mo, his fulgurating shadows is becoming more and more ingenious. Furthermore, his original form isn't that of an ordinary crow. Even if he were to take a punch or two from Li Qingshan, it would be difficult to injure him. Once the situation becomes unfavorable, it wouldn't be a problem for him to escape. Who would be able to catch him if he teleported 100 miles away? Si Bao calmly analyzed the fight between the two of them just now. She was proficient in actual combat, and her words were convincing. In her opinion, at most, this battle would end in a draw. You underestimate the two of them. Mo still has the chance to kill North Moon, and once he fails, North Moon will kill him. North Moon thinks that he can escape the Dragon King's pursuit, but he can't do it. Gu Yenying placed her arm on the railing and looked at the two figures in the sky. "Is that so? I want to continue watching. If it's really as Sister said, then there's no way to make use of them." Si Bao smiled. "Yes, I can only make use of you." Gu Yenying reached out her hand and pinched Si Bao's nose. Making use was just a joke. In these years of interaction, she believed that she had not let down any of them. If it was just one-sided use, they weren't fools. How could they maintain their relationship? This time, she did not help either side, and felt very calm. This time she can't save you. Mou said indifferently. Yes, this time she could have saved you. Unfortunately, you're not smart enough. Li Qingshan smiled. If Mou agreed to a truce, he would not chase after him. Even if it was to give Gu Yenying face, it would be best if he did not provoke the Dragon King of the Sea to come after him. But Mou was obviously determined to kill him, so he definitely had to use this opportunity to end things. As he spoke, he calmed all his emotions, as though he was calming every ripple on this great lake. Facing Mou's omnipresent figure, he actually closed his eyes. Here, there was a slight ripple in his heart, and there was a faint feeling. Li Qingshan suddenly attacked, punching behind him to the right. Mou just happened to move there, preparing to launch a sneak attack and disturb Li Qingshan a little. However, he did not expect to be thrown over the moment he appeared. He had no time to dodge. With a great boom, the fist landed squarely on Mou's chest. Even the air was shaken to pieces, cracking. Mou's body could already be regarded as tough among demon commanders, but wherever Li Qingshan's fist landed, he was still sent flying heavily. His chest was forcefully torn open, revealing hideous wounds. However, these were not his organs, but a pitch-black liquid. It surged violently and churned into a ball. Just as Li Qingshan was about to pursue, Mou had already flashed several hundred meters away. He looked at him in surprise and doubt as he thought, was it luck? Si Bao let out a soft gasp of surprise from the spectating battle. She could clearly tell that Northman's punch was not luck. Instead, it was filled with confidence. Had he grasped the pattern of Mou's movements during the battle? However, this did not seem very likely. Gu Yenying explained her doubt. Didn't I tell you before? He has the ability to confuse the heavenly secrets and evade divination, which also means that he can perform some divination himself. Big Sis, you're saying that he is relying on premonition to grasp Mou's movements. Just what kind of demon is he? Si Bao's eyes widened in disbelief. Knowing divination was nothing, but to be able to use it in such an intense battle to predict the movements of one's opponent was incredible. Even if one was weaker, he could still easily gain the upper hand. Could it be that he was an exotic beast that was born with the ability to predict? I'm not sure either. It seems like he has many different bloodlines mixed together, and each bloodline is extraordinary, which is why he has so many remarkable abilities. However, maintaining this kind of premonition must be extremely taxing on him. He can't do it for long. But even if Mou's physique is extraordinary, how many punches can he take? Gu Yenying silently estimated. It was about time for Mou to use his ultimate move. Li Qingshan flapped his wings of wind and fire, turning into a streak of scarlet light as he flew towards Mou. Before he reached Mou, he suddenly changed his direction and pounced downwards. Sure enough, Mou shifted to the position he expected. A foot stepped on his shoulder, and he fell towards the surface of the lake. His entire shoulder caved in, turning into a blurry mass of black liquid. It took a long time for the force of the shockwave to subside. Just as he was about to fall into the lake, Mou teleported again. Before he could catch his breath, that streak of scarlet light was already within reach. Li Qingshan closed his eyes and flew through the air, constantly bombarding Mou. Even though his body was extremely strange, allowing him to endure extremely great damage, he was basically unable to maintain his form. Under the constant attacks, he could not fight back at all. The expression on his face became more and more human-like, abnormally furious. The spirit turtle was still at the fourth layer, needing to wait for the phoenix to reach the same realm and achieve a balance between water and fire before it could continue advancing. However, after reaching Demon Commander, Li Qingshan's control over the spirit turtle's power had become more and more fluid. after his soul sense had strengthened, he could endure the exhaustion even more. With his speed, as long as he sensed where MOU would teleport to next, he could rush over with a single flap of his wings. If this continued, victory was only a matter of time. MOU teleported again, and Li Qingshan followed him like a shadow, throwing a punch at him. MOU took out a painting scroll from his sumeru ring and unfurled it with a shake of his hand. It was completely blank. Gu Yenying's eyes narrowed. "You've finally taken it out. What is it this time?" Li Qingshan's heart shivered. He wanted to retreat, but it was already too late, so he simply threw a punch at the painting scroll. "Who cares what it is? I'll just tear it apart first." The punch landed on the white paper, creating ripples. Something strange happened. The thin paper did not rip apart, but Li Qingshan's fist sank into the paper inch by inch. The painting scroll suddenly shrank, sucking in Li Qingshan completely. The painting scroll unfurled in MOU's hand, and North Moon's figure appeared on it. He maintained the posture of flapping his wings and punching out. Every single strand of his scarlet hair could be seen clearly, like a lifelike copy of a painting. There was a sliver of delight on MOU's face. "North Moon, I've put up with you for so long. Do you know my power now? I'll take you back to the Ink Sea right now and hand you over to the Dragon King." In the Storm Pavilion, Si Bao said in shock, "MOU actually has such a strange treasure that can seal and suppress. In terms of grade, it can at least be considered a transcendent artifact." Gu Yenying sighed. "Can it really be suppressed? This is MOU's natal item. If he doesn't use this painting scroll, it'll be like what you said. He can still escape, but if this painting scroll is destroyed, he'll definitely be severely injured." "Natal item? How can his natal item be a painting scroll?" Si Bao said in shock. The so-called natal item was usually cultivated from certain parts of the body of the demon race. For example, Sha Bi's shell was such a natal item. It was closely related to the demon's life, and its power was also extremely great. But what kind of demon's natal item would be a painting? Could it be? Si Bao thought of the only possibility. There were all kinds of demons in the world, and no one knew exactly how many types there were. Not all demons were birds or beasts. Sometimes a stone or a well could become a demon if it gained spirituality. Yes, his original form is actually a painting, a crow in a painting. Gu Yenying nodded. At this stage, there was no longer a need to keep his secret. If that's the case, Dragon King of the Sea, no wonder Si Bao suddenly understood many secrets. Why did MOU have the surname Mo, and why the son of the Dragon King was a crow? Gu Yenying said unhurriedly, "The Ink Sea did not get its name from the Dragon King. Legend has it that the Ink Sea was once very clear, and there was an immortal who lived near the sea. He loved painting and calligraphy, and often washed his brushes in the sea. Over time, the sea water turned from clear to black, then black." Si Bao had also heard of this legend, but there were many such folklores. Most of them were exaggerated and not worth mentioning. Hearing it now, she was shocked. Could this legend be true? Who knows? Look, it's time to decide the winner. Chapter 708. The moment he entered the painting, Li Qingshan saw a white world. He could not tell the sky from the ground. It seemed to be boundless, yet it also seemed to be as narrow as a cage. He knew he was trapped in the painting. He frowned instinctively and discovered that he could not move at all. He could not even perform the simplest actions. What made him happy was that he could still use demon chi and activate his innate ability. He immediately unleashed the tremors of the ox demon in an attempt to tear the painting apart from the inside. On the painting paper, streaks of black ink spread from his body, interweaving into the shape of cracks before quickly disappearing. In this world in the painting, his most destructive magical power was turned into a harmless animation. The laws of how the world operated, as well as the way it existed, had been fundamentally changed. A new set of laws had been introduced. It was not hard to imagine that even if he used the flames of the phoenix, he would not be able to burn the painting. At most, there would be a cluster of flame-like ink to indicate that it was burning. Could this be the so-called two-dimensional world? This doesn't feel good at all. Li Qingshan, who was trapped in a difficult situation, did not panic. Instead, he felt a strange sense of novelty, sighing in admiration at this wondrous move. Mou examined the North Moon in the painting in delight. There was nothing more delightful than seeing his enemy reduced to a tiny painting like this. He looked towards the west, at Gu Yenying in the pavilion. Yenying, do you see this? I've won this battle. You may be the smartest girl I've ever seen, but not everything can be predicted. North Moon was just too fast. Mou had no confidence in sweeping him into the painting at all. He had to endure for a long time before grasping the opportunity to secure victory. Li Qingshan examined this white world quietly and gradually discovered that it was not pure white. Instead, it was slightly yellowish, like an ancient painting that had experienced time. Tui, isn't that obvious? This is a painting in the first place. He cursed in his heart. Suddenly, he discovered that there were some white figures in this white world. They were much fairer than the yellowish surroundings. He could vaguely make out that it was a bird standing on a bamboo. Could this be something from a painting in the past? Birds. Bamboo. Li Qingshan suddenly thought of the black bamboo flute that Mou had played. Could that bird be a crow? And the one that was trapped in the painting was Mou? No, he was not trapped, but he was a painting. I see. It's no wonder he can endure my attacks time and time again. Logically speaking, with my current strength and the destructive power of the tremors of the ox demon, any demon commander would be smashed to pulp if they took a hit from me. But he was safe and sound. Rather than saying that his original form was a crow, it would be more accurate to say that he was a blob of ink. He did not have any flesh, blood, bones, brain, or heart, so he did not have any vital points. Even if the body is shattered, it can heal again. Li Qingshan thought of this, but it did not seem to be of much help to his predicament. Now was not the time to think about the content of the painting, but how to get out of the painting. He had to get himself moving first. It was fine if it was a 2D animation, but it was still an anime. However, whenever he wanted to move his body with great strength, he would feel like his bones and tendons were firmly pinned to the spot by an omnipresent power. He could not even contract his muscles. The only thing worth rejoicing over was that Mou said he would take him back to the Ink Sea for the Dragon King to deal with. As it seemed, the painting could only seal, but it could not attack the sealed target from outside. This was rather similar to the Demon Suppression Tower. That made sense, or the painting would be ridiculously powerful. All Mou had to do was move behind him and take advantage of when he was not using the painting. Then, wouldn't even demon kings be at his mercy? He did not know that Mou was currently hesitating as well, as the painting was his life-bound item. He could obviously enter the painting and launch an attack. However, the strength that the North Moon had demonstrated just now left him shaken. Li Qingshan would not just sit there obediently. He silently mobilized the power of the spirit turtle and began analyzing the painting. On the painting, he rippled and vanished at the edge of the paper. He gradually came to a slight understanding. The shackles did not come from the painting, but from himself. He was still rather adapted to the life of the person in the painting. This adaptation was not a habit, but an understanding of the laws. What's this? Give up. All struggles are futile. Today is the day you die. Mou's eyes were pitch black like ink. His voice was hoarse and unpleasant, filled with a deathly stillness. He used his two great innate abilities, the gaze of death and the death-bringer curse. He decided to weaken the North Moon outside the painting first. If he could extinguish his will to live, that would be for the best. Li Qingshan's frozen eyes suddenly swiveled around, meeting Mou's gaze. He also saw the world outside the painting. He blinked his eyes at first before his entire face became animated. He showed an expression of disdain as he opened and closed his mouth. Mou, stop wasting your efforts. And I had thought you were some kind of demon, but it turns out you're just a blob of ink. This must be your final move. Ha! What's so difficult about breaking free from this painting? Mou was alarmed. He never thought he would actually adapt so quickly. He immediately dismissed the thought of entering the painting. The world in the painting was his home ground, able to suppress him in various ways, but he really did not want to clash with the North Moon anymore. It was better to take him back to the Ink Sea and deal with him. Stop talking nonsense. Do you think you can break free from the painting just because you've adapted to the laws of the painting? There are plenty of ways to break free. Let's try this move first. An incomplete sword suddenly appeared in Li Qingshan's hand. It was pitch black like ink. He moved as well, swinging it gently at Mou. A sharp strand of sword qi shot out from the paper. Mou was not afraid of Li Qingshan's punch, but his expression changed when he saw the sword qi. He dodged in a hurry. However, in his haste, a sword mark was left on his pale face. Black blood flowed from it, and it did not heal even after a long time. This incomplete black sword was the sword qi that Li Qingshan had cultivated in his body after refining the three absolutes calligraphy. After refining the ocean pearl, this sword qi had become even more condensed. It was originally just a sword qi, but Li Qingshan, who was in the painting, was able to grasp it in his hand and swing it like a real sword. When he was analyzing this painting scroll, Li Qingshan unexpectedly discovered a familiar mark. It was a mark left behind by the person who had drawn the painting. This painting and the three absolutes calligraphy actually came from the same source. Naturally, he thought of the incomplete sword qi in his body. The strike worked, and Li Qingshan laughed aloud. The incomplete sword in his hand turned into streaks of ink, like a well-made ink animation. Sword qi shot out. Every time a strand of sword qi left the paper and became a real sword qi, Li Qingshan understood a little more. Although it was a little sudden to be sealed into the second dimension from the third dimension, it was not impossible to escape from this second dimension. Now, he understood at least three things. First, Mou was probably the work of the five absolutes immortal, which was why he was restrained by the incomplete sword in his hand. If that was the case, could it be that the Dragon King of the Sea was also an object in the painting? Second, as long as he destroyed this painting scroll, he would be able to heavily injure Mou. If he could refine this scroll, he might even have a chance to control him. This painting could be considered a treasure, and he could even use it to threaten the Dragon King of the Sea. However, the chances of this were not high. Third, the five absolutes immortal was fucking awesome. It was no wonder Brother Ox had praised the incomplete three absolutes calligraphy that was merely a spiritual artifact. Of course, he had only said something along the lines of, "This junior has some potential." Strands of sword qi shot out from the painting, and Mou was clearly in an extremely miserable shape. As long as he was locked onto by the sword intent, the sword qi would pursue him endlessly. He could only block, not dodge. If it were any other demon commander, blocking these strands of sword qi would be no problem at all, but he was restrained by the sword qi. Every strand of sword qi that landed on him would definitely leave behind a wound. As a result, he was caught between a rock and a hard place. He was outside the painting, so he could not directly attack North Moon. All of his attacks would be converted into ink when they landed on the scroll. This was a law the painter had set down to protect his painting. After all, the painting had never been used to seal up enemies. The only exception was if there was a power that surpassed this law. However, that would directly destroy the painting, which was something you could not accept. If he rolled up the painting scroll, it probably would not take long for it to be torn apart, allowing North Moon to escape. You knew how the three absolutes calligraphy had been torn into so many pieces in the past. All he could do was hope that the incomplete sword in North Moon's hand would run out of energy, so he could immediately roll up the painting scroll and bring it back to the ink sea for the Dragon King to deal with. As he constantly swung it, the incomplete sword in Li Qingshan's hand indeed became shorter and shorter. In the end, only the hilt remained. After all, it was only condensed from sword chi, so it was not infinite. Before you could even catch his breath, Li Qingshan fished out another true three absolutes calligraphy. The incomplete sword in his hand immediately returned to its original state, becoming even more condensed and sharp. As long as his spiritual chi did not run out, he could keep swinging it until he tore through the painting scroll. Oh no! You also understood who had killed his subordinates during the exhibition matches of the 9 prefectures and stolen the 3 absolutes calligraphy. When he thought of Gu Yeniying's warning, he was tempted to let go of North Moon and leave. However, when he thought of North Moon's various mockery, he made up his mind. He also took out a 3 absolutes calligraphy and leaped into the painting. The uncontrolled painting scroll floated towards the surface of the lake. In the storm pavilion, Gu Yeniying's eyes were like an eagle's as she stared at the scene in the painting. Each of them held an ink sword and engaged in an intense battle. Clusters of ink danced and danced on the yellowed paper. Their figures overlapped and separated at times. You naturally understood the laws of the painting better than Li Qingshan. He could even use the painting scroll to suppress Li Qingshan. This was the reason why he dared to leap into the painting and easily gain the upper hand. Si Bao kept turning her head, wanting to see the front of the painting scroll clearly. Sister, who will win? Gu Yenying sighed. The outcome has been decided. The painting scroll floated along with the night wind and finally could not resist the pull of gravity. Just as it was about to fall into the water, Yu suddenly broke free from the painting. His body was covered with wounds, and his brows were tightly furrowed. The ink sword in his hand had disappeared. He clutched his chest with one hand and grabbed the painting scroll with the other. With a forceful shake, Li Qingshan was flung out of the painting. He bit a 3 absolutes calligraphy in his mouth and held another 3 absolutes calligraphy in his left hand. Yu immediately spread his black wings and tried to escape. His hand tightened, and he turned around to see that Li Qingshan was holding onto the other painting scroll. Yu roared, "Let go!" Li Qingshan smiled. "Don't even think about it." Chapter 709. After a series of battles, Li Qingshan finally gained the upper hand. He was tempted to laugh aloud. In the painting, although Yu had the upper hand in the beginning, his demon chi was not limitless. He had used many abilities at full strength and was heavily injured by Li Qingshan a few times, so it had actually taken a lot out of him. On the other hand, Li Qingshan displayed astonishing endurance. As time went by, Yu gradually ran out of stamina. He was struck 3 times by Li Qingshan and lost. It would not be easy for him to break free now. Li Qingshan gripped the painting firmly. Even if the Dragon King of the Sea took action, he would not be able to take it away completely. The painting did possess wondrous effects, but in terms of toughness, it was not as tough as some arcane artifacts forged from metal. It definitely could not withstand the full strength of two demon commanders. You, North Moon, what do you want? At that moment, fury flooded MOU's face, but he immediately recovered his expressionless, dead face. Now that the North Moon had the upper hand, he did not strike immediately. He clearly had other plans. Why don't you let go first, and we can talk about it slowly? Li Qingshan had already noticed that the painting was extremely important to MOU. Otherwise, it would take him some effort to escape after he broke free from the painting. By then, MOU would have fled far away long ago, making it difficult for him to catch up. However, Li Qingshan did not mind letting him go just to take the painting with him. The reason why he was in no hurry to strike was obviously to maximize his benefits and minimize conflict. If MOU really did originate from the painting, then it was very likely that he would be able to control him as long as he refined the painting. With a hostage like that, even the Dragon King of the Sea would have to hold back. Judging from MOU's reaction, Li Qingshan was even more certain of his reasoning. Feel free to state your conditions, but don't even think about getting this painting. MOU's words were resolute and decisive. This painting was where his roots lay, even though it had its own will. Although he had become a demon that could cultivate, he was still unable to break free from this connection. From a certain perspective, he was the so-called artifact spirit. If the North Moon refined him, he would only end up as a servant. You don't seem to understand who's in charge now. Li Qingshan suddenly pulled back. The scroll was stretched taut. Although there was still a smile on his face, a cold light flashed in his scarlet eyes. He glanced at MOU's hand, which was holding onto the scroll. The originally pale hand had now turned jet black, almost fusing with the scroll. Otherwise, he would have to consider launching a surprise attack. If you dare to destroy this painting, you will become an irreconcilable enemy of MO High. From this Azure province, no, there is no place for you in 9 regions anymore. Could it be that if I let you go today, we can still turn from enemies into friends and become a pair of good friends? Li Qingshan sneered. This kind of threat made it seem like MOU was only putting up a strong front. Could it be that he would have to wait until he had overcome the 3rd heavenly tribulation and become a demon king before seeking revenge? MOU looked up at the sky and let out a long sigh. Forget it. Li Qingshan smiled. You've finally given in. However, MOU's expression sharpened. He pulled hard, and with a rip, the scroll was snapped in half. MOU would actually rather destroy it than hand it over to Li Qingshan. Light surged out from where the scroll was snapped, forming a ball of white liquid. It changed shape and enveloped Li Qingshan. This was the strange world that existed in the scroll. Before it completely dispersed, MOU had used it as a final counterattack. Once he was enveloped by it, even Li Qingshan would be heavily injured. However, Li Qingshan was always on guard, so how could he fall for it? He immediately pulled back and retreated. The white liquid dispersed very quickly, merging with the space there. When he looked again, MOU had already vanished into the black vortex with the remaining half of the painting, completely cutting off any possibility of Li Qingshan repairing the painting. You sure are decisive, but you've already come this far. You still want to leave? Li Qingshan praised. His expression sharpened, and he flapped his wings and rushed into the air. As the world spun around him, pieces of the spirit turtle's profound shell flew out. Li Qingshan closed his eyes before opening them again. The southwest, profound light illuminates all. With a wave of his hand, all the pieces of the spirit turtle's profound shell stacked on top of each other, illuminating the southwest. Sure enough, he discovered MOU several hundred kilometers away. He never thought he would not flee in the direction of the ink sea, instead going in the opposite direction. At least he did not lose his bearings. Li Qingshan turned into a scarlet streak of light, whistling off in the southwest like a comet. As soon as Mo.U shifted successfully, a mouthful of black blood sprayed from his mouth violently, ripping the scroll apart, had already inflicted irreparable damage on him. Suddenly, he felt a chill in his heart. Looking back, a few hundred miles away, there seemed to be a scarlet eye staring at him. He suppressed his injuries and immediately teleported a second time, changing directions once more. He's going north again. Profound light illuminates all. Mo.U shifted 3 times in a row, constantly changing directions. The feeling of being watched followed him like a shadow, like a sharp sword hanging over his head, ready to fall down at any time. And he shifted closer and closer each time. He barely managed to shift a final time, but he only shifted a few dozen kilometers away. He still did not escape from the surveillance. He knew this was just the matter of a sprint to North Moon. Mo.U was already exhausted. His wounds erupted violently. The wounds left behind by the 3 Absolutes' calligraphy had only healed after much difficulty, but they all split open now, oozing with black blood. In just a while, a scarlet streak of light leapt out of the horizon and flew over. Mo.U knew there was no hope of escaping, so he just stood in the air and watched the scarlet light approach him calmly. North Moon, you've gone too far. Li Qingshan opened his mouth and exhaled. A gust of wind grew from small to large, turning into a whistling tornado that swept towards Mo.U. If I tear you to pieces, can you still recover? In the West Mountain Storm Pavilion, Si Bao saw them disappear and was about to fly after the scarlet light of North Moon when a hand pressed down on her shoulder. Si Bao looked back and said in confusion, "Sister, we should go back. Aren't we going to see the result? Life and death have been decided." Gu Yening shook her head heavily. She really hoped that Mo.U could agree to Li Qingshan's conditions. That way, there would still be room for negotiation. They could ask the Dragon King of the Sea to come forward, pay the price, make an agreement, and so on, but she also understood that Mo.U would not accept it. She could go and persuade Li Qingshan to let Mo.U live, but he would not agree either. She had heard many high-sounding words, like, "It's for your own good," but she also understood how disgusting these words were. They pretended to predict the other's future, and if they did not do as they said, they would do this and that. Even if that was the case, how many people would be willing to accept it? She knew it was useless, but in the end, she still said it. In the end, it was still useless. There was nothing worse than watching a terrible thing happen and being unable to stop it. From now on, in this cultivation world, there would be 2 less acquaintances. Mo.U let out a shrill cry and turned into a black crow. He bypassed the wind pillar and flew towards Li Qingshan, drops of ink dripping from his body. Facing the counterattack of absolute death, Li Qingshan also restrained his expression. He silently raised his fist and prepared to send this enemy on his last journey. Suddenly, he twisted his body and punched behind him. The crow disappeared and turned back into Mo.U, appearing right behind him. Facing this fatal punch, Mo.U opened his arms. There was no fear on his face, not even the slightest bit of shock. The corners of his mouth curled up into a smile, and his lips opened and closed soundlessly. "You will die." Li Qingshan's heart sank. Just as his fist touched Mo.U's body, he turned into a mass of black ink and exploded with a loud bang. He had blown up his demon core and taken him down with him. The power was 10 times greater than any golden core cultivator blowing up their golden cores that Li Qingshan had seen in the past. The surroundings seemed to be dyed black by ink. The ball of darkness filled with the power of death swelled to the limit, and it also seemed like a black sun had appeared in the sky. Within a range of several dozen kilometers, all vegetation withered and all humans and animals died. Li Qingshan had been expecting this a long time ago, so he had made corresponding preparations. In the moment Mou blew up his demon core, pieces of the spirit turtle's profound shell flew out, forming a stable sphere. After reaching Demon Commander, the defenses of the most basic ability of the spirit turtle's profound shell had become even more powerful. The black sun swallowed it silently. Immediately, cracks appeared on the spirit turtle's profound shell, and it tottered. It only lasted for a while before shattering loudly. The darkness swallowed Li Qingshan as well. The power of death attacked his flames of life one last time. This was not because the spirit turtle's profound shell was not powerful enough. Instead, Li Qingshan had been constantly using his innate abilities and constantly making predictions throughout the battle. Both his mind and demon chi had been greatly depleted. The black sun gradually shrank before vanishing in the end. Li Qingshan gazed at the crescent moon and the sky filled with stars. He exhaled deeply and smiled. Mou, I'm still alive after all. The moment the spirit turtle's profound shell had lasted for was crucial, blocking most of the damage. Fortunately, the power of the explosion had no guidance. It only spread out in all directions in a disorderly manner, or he really would have been in danger. After going through so many hardships, killing Ko Cho had been a joy. Though it was time to run now. Thousands of kilometers away, before the life lamp had even been extinguished, a pair of dragon eyes opened again. The ink sea began to surge. In the ink sea, the Dragon King roared. In South Hub City, the Lord of the Green Province, Chu Lai King, set foot on the city walls and gazed into the depths of the ink sea. His soul's sense covered thousands of kilometers, and all he saw was an ink dragon rushing into the sky. It slithered through the air like a huge pillar that held up the sky, connecting the sky and the sea. The ink sea roared madly, wanting to follow it. "Fellow ink dragon, what's happened?" Chu Lai King asked loudly. The Dragon King of the sea did not answer. He shot past above South Hub City, directly towards the southwest, thousands of kilometers away. All of Li Qingshan's hairs stood on end. He experienced unprecedented fear. There were clearly no enemies within his senses, but the feeling of danger was like a sword swinging towards his neck. It was only a millimeter away, and his head would roll to the ground. He composed himself and prepared himself with the spirit turtle, just in case divination locked onto his position. In the end, he concealed his aura. However, a problem had occurred at this step. Just now, from the explosion, his body was drenched in ink. Upon closer inspection, the ink was not just on his skin, but also deep into his muscles and bones. Even his demon core was covered in a layer of deathly aura. Although it could not harm him, it could not be completely removed in a short amount of time. If he guessed correctly, the Dragon King of the Sea and Mou came from the same source. As such, the ink was as eye-catching as a bright lamp in the darkness. No matter how he concealed his aura, it was useless. Is this Mou's final curse? Hee, I was just joking in the past. This is what you call a fucking curse of death. I have to say, beautifully done. Li Qingshan praised. He flapped his wings and dove into the atmospheric winds. Chapter 7:10. The atmospheric winds were as sharp as blades, leaving behind wounds on Li Qingshan's body. Even the ox demon forges, its hide could not stop them, and he did not have the strength to spare to use the spirit turtle's profound shell either. Instead, he focused all of his attention on the pair of wings on his back. The word wind was crucial to the wings of wind. Li Qingshan had discovered by chance that gathering atmospheric winds could increase the wings of wind by quite a lot, but he could not maintain it for long. As a result, he flew into the atmospheric winds. Even if he became injured, he would not care. Strands of atmospheric winds wove into the wings of wind, allowing him to erupt with unprecedented speed. He flew towards the southwest, or more accurately, away from the ink sea. The atmospheric winds whistled past his ears, and the ground moved in a hurry. New sceneries constantly appeared on the horizon. It was too much for the eye to take in. If it were not for the impending disaster behind him, it would have been an extremely delightful sight. However, even at such a level of speed, the sense of danger in his heart still did not ease up. Instead, it grew heavier and heavier. Li Qingshan understood that the Dragon King of the Sea was definitely faster than him. His only advantage was the distance of over 5,000 kilometers from the very beginning. If he did not deal with the ink marks on him, being caught was only a matter of time. Running away was useless. So as soon as Li Qingshan discovered the effects of the ink marks, he immediately powered the demon core with everything he had. The demon core of water and fire revolved, shining with scarlet and blue light. The phoenix burned while the spirit turtle suppressed, purging the aura of death from the demon core strand by strand before spreading it around his body to deal with the ink marks that clung to him like maggots. However, this process was very slow, like stubborn stains. Repeated scrubbing could only make them fade slightly. Li Qingshan did not relax at all. He maintained the greatest speed he could reach and fled into the distance. This seemed to be a replica of him, and M.O., you just now. He could not help but sigh with a smile. Retribution, sure, came far too quickly. He had encountered the same problem as MOU. First of all, his demon chi could not last for much longer. After a bitter battle, he had no time to rest. He had to flee for his life. Powering the wings of wind consumed demon chi, and cleaning up the ink marks on him consumed demon chi even more. If it were not for his prior preparations, he would have run out of supplies already. He gripped the Azura field tightly, drawing out the spiritual energy that had just been stored inside and guiding it into his body. However, the efficiency was clearly incomparable to using the water god's seal directly. The recovery speed was far from being able to keep up with the consumption. In order to conserve his demonic chi, he didn't even dare to use his demonic chi to heal the wounds torn by the astral winds. Instead, he relied on his body's regenerative abilities to heal them. The demonic aura continued to deplete. 30%, 20%, 10%, the deep ocean pearl suddenly began to spin. If the Yao core was the essence of his Yao cultivation, then the deep ocean pearl was the crystallization of his human cultivation. Under his urging, streams of spiritual energy were injected into the Yao core, transforming into Yao Qi. Moreover, he still had his final trump card, the divine talisman of great creation. The Cloud Wisp Society was developing quite well. As the greatest contributor, Li Qingshan's novels were greatly promoted. The willpower gathered in the divine talisman of great creation was already 10 times greater than before. It could be said to be the last line of defense. But at the same time, there was another problem that troubled him, and that was fatigue. Fiercely flapping the phoenix wings consumed a great deal of energy. The ox demon was famed for its endurance, and ever since he obtained the strength of the earth, he had almost never felt tired. But now, exhaustion was quietly creeping into his body and slowly spreading. Although he didn't need to stand on the ground to use the divine earth strength now, it was still greatly affected when he was far away from the ground in the sky. However, if he left the astral winds, his speed would immediately slow down. The current situation could be said to be one of external and internal problems. He had yet to see the Dragon King of the Sea, but he already felt like he was about to collapse. Li Qingshan stood in the air, his scarlet hair fluttering in the wind. His scarlet eyes gazed into the east. On the horizon, a darkness that was even deeper than the night spread, covering the stars and the moon like a dark cloud. In the blink of an eye, it had filled half the sky, enveloping the heavens. In a split second, Li Qingshan felt an oppressive feeling that was close to suffocation. His mind trembled, but he immediately calmed down and shouted towards the sky, "Dragon King of the Sea!" The dark cloud was like ink that had melted in water. It floated continuously as if it was a living thing. Scales and claws could be faintly seen within. A pair of dragon eyes lit up and swept an indifferent glance at him, as if he had been pierced by a sharp sword. Then he withdrew his gaze. The ink-like dark cloud passed over his head, and in the blink of an eye, he had reached the other end of the horizon. Li Qingshan lowered his head, only to see a blob of ink stain on his chest. It was constantly spreading and expanding. His brows furrowed, and his body suddenly burst apart, turning into millions of water droplets that fell into Calm Wave Lake. 10,000 kilometers away, Li Qingshan was horrified. Through the eyes of his mirror clone, he finally saw the Dragon King of the Sea, who had pursued him from so far away. Originally, he wanted to buy himself some time, but the clone had been defeated in a single clash. This was a mirror clone that possessed a portion of his strength, and was the strongest he had ever created. It was in no way weaker than any demon commander, yet he had failed to see how the other party had attacked. Only when he was struck did he realize that he had been pierced by a drop of ink. With his vitality, he would not necessarily die even if his heart was pierced by 10,000 arrows. However, instead of saying that the drop of ink had killed the mirror clone, it was more accurate to say that it had destroyed the innate divine ability, the water mirror's image, from its very foundation. And that drop of ink contained a powerful will that directly penetrated through the doppelganger, wanting to attack his original body. If not for the fact that his mirror doppelganger was different from ordinary doppelganger techniques, this move would have caused serious damage to his original body. This was no longer just a difference in strength. It was also a chasm in terms of cultivation. It was no wonder that the Dragon King of the Sea could make the Beast King of the Dragon Province retreat with a single word, forcing him to let go of his disciple's death. No matter how many schemes you had, it would all be useless against an opponent like that. However, he had already achieved two of his objectives in sending out his mirror clone. The first was to assess the Dragon King of the Sea's speed. In the end, the Dragon King of the Sea would definitely catch up before he could clean up all the ink on his body. The second was to assess his strength. In the end, once he caught up, he would be dead for sure. Right now, his original body situation was even worse than his clone's. Even if he could tell how the Dragon King of the Sea had attacked, he probably could not even block a single attack. Although the distance between them was so great that mortals would never be able to cross it in their entire lives, it was as dangerous as a fish on a chopping block to him. He had considered seeking refuge with the Golden Cicada Spirit King or the Banyan Tree King in the past, but they were only fellow cultivators. The Golden Cicada Spirit King admired him, but he did not owe him anything. His only objective was to jump out of the well. Anyone who destroyed this objective was his enemy. Although the Banyan Tree King had once tried to recruit him, he would not go against the neutrality he had maintained for 10,000 years and fend off the Dragon King of the Sea's wrath for him. Fellow cultivators, only those who walked the same path were friends. If they tried to interfere with another person's path through emotions, it would only destroy their friendship. Having understood this, Li Qingshan had never thought about seeking refuge with anyone in the first place. Chapter 7:11. No, there's always a way out. Li Qingshan glanced down and discovered that before he knew it, the landscape on the ground had already become completely different from the Green Province. The lush vegetation formed a blue sea, covering the land that rose and fell with mountains and rivers. It was filled with a primitive, savage aura. Huge, monstrous birds flew across the sky. The dense forest was shrouded in mist, and waves of demonic qi came from it. If demons in the Green Province were bold enough to fly through the sky and walk on the ground so openly, they would be butchered by cultivators very soon. Is this the Mist Province already? Li Qingshan had been flying southwest the entire time. He had already crossed a distance of over 5,000 kilometers now, entering the Mist Province. The spiritual qi in the ocean pearl was about to run out too, and his body was utterly exhausted. Killing intent loomed over him too. After flying for a while longer, he suddenly saw a black pillar of smoke rush into the air. His eyes narrowed, and he saw mountains appear on the horizon. However, these mountains were very unusual. They were bare, without any vegetation, and they did not have peaks either. The black pillar of smoke originated from one of the mountains, and rivers of fire flowed out from the mouth of the mountain. It's a cluster of volcanoes. Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. He felt like a flash of inspiration had passed through his head, but he was unable to describe what the inspiration was. The phoenix wings retracted backwards, leaving the astral wind layer. It streaked across the sky like a perfectly straight scarlet light, entering the erupting volcano. The flowing magma was scorching and dazzling. The phoenix wings became increasingly gorgeous amidst the blazing flames. The strength of the earth began to come into effect. Power surged into his body, and the feeling of exhaustion vanished. Li Qingshan felt refreshed, but he dared not stop at all. He passed through the cracks and dove into the depths of the volcano. Li Qingshan had the experience of cultivating underground. He used the tremors of the ox demon skillfully and carved out a path through the cracks. The phoenix's scripture of Nerva also drastically reduced the damage the scorching heat and flames caused him. He could withstand the remaining damage with his ox hide. Most importantly, even though the gushing seams also contained the underground magnetic force, it was not as powerful as the underground magnetic force. However, it was nowhere near as intense as it was underground. If he were underground, he would never be bold enough to dive into the magma. As he expected, there was a large layer of magma beneath the active volcano. He continued to flee in the magma. As she flapped her phoenix wings, she gathered waves of fire spiritual energy and used the flames to wash away the ink stains on her body. As expected, the speed at which the ink marks faded was much faster. However, the difference between his speed in the magma and flying in the astral wind was like the difference between a snail and a bird. He couldn't use his wings of wind to its fullest, and he was also disturbed by the underground magnetic field. For every moment he delayed, the Dragon King of the Sea would close in on him. After a while, they reached the end of the lava layer. He had to make a choice. He could either continue to stay in the lava and wash away the ink stains on his body, or bet that he could wash away all the ink stains on his body before the Dragon King of the Sea caught up to him. Otherwise, he would return to the ground and continue to use his speed to buy time. But Li Qingshan was very clear. Regardless of the choice, he would not be able to escape the fate of the Dragon King of the Sea catching up to him. At most, the latter would allow him to live a little longer. What was the point of entering this sowing because of that inexplicable flash of inspiration? Was he supposed to waste some time for nothing, or was he supposed to just die in the flames and ask for a quick death? To the southwest of the volcanoes, hot springs of various sizes gurgled, giving off white steam. With a boom, a streak of fire rushed out of the hot springs. Li Qingshan rushed into the air once again, flying off in the southwest direction towards the depths of the Mist Province. A while later, a black cloud swept past the volcanoes, directly heading towards the southwest. The ink stains were cleaned away bit by bit until only a single patch remained. Li Qingshan's face was completely devoid of joy. Suddenly, he looked back, only to see a black line appear on the horizon. The black line rapidly expanded. A pair of dragon eyes that were as deep as ink locked onto him from over 500 kilometers away. He was currently flying at full speed. If he had remained where he was, the black line would probably have swept across the sky in the blink of an eye. Li Qingshan looked back ahead and clenched his fist. The moment of life or death was about to arrive. Of course, all that could be decided was his own life or death. As a result, he stopped fleeing and threw himself towards the boundless ground. With a boom, the ground shook. Countless towering trees were torn to pieces and blown away, allowing sunlight to shine down on his face. A pair of scarlet eyes gazed at the distant sky. The black clouds blotted out the sky and pressed down heavily. A mountainous dragon head hung down, staring at him. There was no hysterical hatred, nor was there any surging killing intent. It was like a god looking down on the ants of the common people. Li Qingshan faced it head-on proudly and rose up from the ground. 10 meters, 15 meters, 30 meters, 60 meters, 120 meters. There was no panic from being driven into a corner. There was no fear from the arrival of death. There was only surging battle intent. You've done something you shouldn't have done. The Dragon King of the Sea was not in a hurry to attack. He opened his mouth and said, his voice was like the clouds in the sky, mighty and boundless. Within a radius of 1,000 miles, all humans and beasts looked blankly at the sky if they had a bit of intelligence. The existence that was too huge and beyond their understanding had instead lost the ability to fear. And the more powerful the demon and cultivator, the more they could feel the trembling from the soul. Since you've already done it, there's nothing to be said about whether I should or shouldn't. Come on. Li Qingshan opened his arms. His wings were glorious, and he was in high spirits. He said, come on. The Dragon King of the Sea seemed to be a little surprised by his courage or stubbornness. He felt the pull of fate in the unseen world and was momentarily speechless. Without waiting for the Dragon King of the Sea to respond, Li Qingshan flapped his wings and soared into the sky. The closer he was to the Dragon King of the Sea, the more he could feel the strong pressure. There was really no chance of winning this battle. He would definitely die. He smiled and swung his fist at the dragon's head. A few droplets of ink tore through the air, but he was already powerless to dodge right now, so he did not bother dodging at all. His body began to burn. First, it was the glorious wings on his back, followed by his scarlet hair that was like fire. His blood, brimming with vitality, also turned into flames, seeping through his skin and igniting everything, turning into a magnificent ball of flames. Like a comet of fire, he rushed into the sea of clouds that blotted out the sky. Flash! Extinguish! In the main hall of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga, Little and the Buddha sat before each other in silence, striking the wooden fish. Thump! 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 The steady, unchanging sounds of the wooden fish seemed like it could last for 1,000 years. The ancient Buddha would remain the same even after 10,000 years. Thump! The wooden fish shattered. Little and suddenly looked back. She felt a sense of fear, which appeared on her beautiful face. Ever since she entered the Chan Monastery of Devanaga, she had never spoken to anyone under the name of practicing silent meditation. Now, she cried out involuntarily, Qingshan! The firelight flickered in the sea of clouds before dimming and extinguishing very soon. The dark clouds in the sky gathered together, turning into a man in ink-green robes. He stood there with his hands behind his back, sinking into his thoughts. Everything returned to normal. He had already avenged himself, except he did not see the demon core or any other items. There should have been an azura field among them. This was nothing strange. He knew he was dead for sure, so he obviously did not want to let the enemy take advantage of him. He had probably abandoned them along the way. If a soul nascence cultivator's soul nascence had fled, there was still a chance for them to be reborn, but a mere demon core was useless. Their bodies had been completely destroyed, and even their souls had been incinerated in the flames. North Moon is already dead. The Dragon King of Ink, Sea, was certain of this. It was not to the extent where he could not even tell the difference between his original body and his clone. He could clearly feel that in the unseen world, that sliver of fate had been severed, although there were still some parts that he could not see through. Who could completely understand fate? Perhaps only the gods and Buddhas of the 9 heavens could achieve that. It was also possible that they could not. He had no way of knowing about this. At this moment, he suddenly remembered that according to his senses, North Moon had once slowed down in a cluster of volcanoes. It was very likely for him to have left the demon core and items there. The Dragon King of the Sea returned to the volcanoes and spread his soul sense to search around, diving deep into the magma. The further down he went, the stronger the interference from the underground magnetic field became. In the end, he found nothing, so he no longer bothered himself. He turned into a black dragon and vanished into the horizon. A demon core and an azura field had never mattered to him in the first place. Unbeknownst to the Dragon King of the Sea, as long as his soul sense penetrated another 5 kilometers or so underground, he would be able to find a demon core. However, at that depth, the double interference from the underground magnetic field and the magma made it impossible for even a powerful demon king to use his soul sense as he wished, unless the Dragon King of the Sea was willing to go down and search for it himself. But under the circumstances where his senses were suppressed to the extreme, this was also not an easy task. Thus, the demon core floated quietly in the blazing magma. Not far away, the ownerless azura field emitted a ring of bloody light, protecting itself from the damage of the magma. Not long ago, Li Qingshan was in the magma, trapped in a dilemma. He was trying his best to pursue that ray of inspiration in his mind. Amidst the roiling flames, he instinctively circulated the Phoenix Nirvana Sutra. The fire spiritual energy he absorbed flowed through his body and finally gathered on the demon core. At this moment, the 10th innate ability that he had never been able to understand suddenly appeared before his eyes. It was actually in a state where he could actually understand and use it. Li Qingshan's mind shook. So this is the phoenix's innate ability. Legend had it that whenever a phoenix's lifespan came to an end, it would throw itself into the fire and turn into ashes, obtaining rebirth from the blazing flames. The world called this nirvana, symbolizing immortality. The full name of the phoenix transformation was the Phoenix Nirvana Sutra. Thus, when he left and continued to flee, he left the demon core and the azura field in the magma. At the same time, he stored the ocean pearl, demon heart, divine talisman of great creation, and even the water god seal and 100 treasures pouch in the azura field. Under his control, the demon core and the azura field sank into the depths of the magma. In the instant that Li Qingshan turned into flames and burned to ashes, the demon core flashed with light, then quickly retracted. Only now did it start to shine again, emitting rings of scarlet light. They gathered the roiling flames and slowly began to spin. The demon core spun faster and faster, the scarlet flames gradually becoming more tangible, turning into a fiery phoenix egg. Chapter 7:12. When the flames burned out, it was shrouded by the dark clouds of death, and everything returned to darkness. Suddenly, a ray of spiritual light passed through, and a wisp of consciousness awoke. It was blurry, and he was bewitched. Everything seemed to have returned to a long, long time ago, longer than the North Moon, longer than Li Qingshan, and even longer than Lier. At that time, he didn't have a name yet, and he was at the intersection of his past life and this life, in his mother's womb. He curled up peacefully, waiting for the day he was born. He couldn't be sure if he had really been reborn, or if he had transmigrated to another world. Only when he felt the scorching, warm, and life-filled liquid around him did he slowly believe that he was still alive. He had won the bet. It turned out that the phoenix's supernatural power could only be used in blazing flames. It wasn't used to attack, nor was it used to defend. It was used for rebirth, just like in the legends. Phoenix's fire, nirvana rebirth. This reminded him of Xianyue. She had the ability to come back from the dead. However, this ability sounded very powerful, but it was not without reason that Gu Yenying had evaluated it as useless, and the phoenix's nirvana could only receive such an evaluation. If he encountered an enemy he couldn't resist, the demon core would most likely be taken away. How could he be reborn calmly? Unless the enemy's strength was far greater than his, he definitely wouldn't let the demon core be separated from his body. It would be too late to separate it when they met face to face, but if they didn't meet face to face, there was no need at all. This time, if it wasn't for Mou's curse and the ink stains on his body, he could have retracted his aura and escaped calmly. This was a very special situation, and the probability of it happening again was very small. No matter what, it had helped him escape once, and he couldn't ask for more. After all, it was the legendary Eternal Life ability, and he had a vague feeling that it wasn't that simple. But what he wanted to know the most was when he would be able to get out of this situation. He wanted to look around, but he couldn't open his eyes. He wanted to stretch his arms and legs, but he couldn't feel them. Helplessly, he discovered that he was also a ball of liquid, and he was in an oval egg, but he wasn't sure if there was egg white and yolk. The so-called "the more you muddle along, the worse you get" was probably referring to this situation. But after muddling along, he became an egg, which was really terrible. Could this be the legendary bastard? Bastard! He cursed in his heart. Even though he did not have a fist to clench and no teeth to bite, he still made up his mind. One day, he would go to the Ink Sea to slay a dragon and let the old dragon witness his prowess. He would hang the dragon on the wall as an ornament. The future was bright, but the road was full of twists and turns. Now, the only thing left to do was to hatch the eggs. Since he had nothing to do, he could only kill time by letting his mind wander. Abruptly, he recalled a saying, "The world is as chaotic as a chicken." Pangu was born in it. He lived for tens of thousands of years. When the world was created, the clear yang was the sky, and the muddy yin was the earth. Before the world was created, the world was chaotic like a big egg. Chaos was the beginning of all things, the source of all life. At this moment, he'd returned to the primal chaos and was searching for his roots. He was like a towering tree that had turned back into a seed, and he was experiencing the process of germination and growth once more. However, it was absolutely not a mere repetition. After experiencing it once, the tree would definitely grow taller and thicker. Legend had it that after a phoenix was reborn, it would become even more beautiful and powerful. Li Qingshan seemed to have understood something. He began to circulate the Phoenix Nirvana Sutra and waited for the day he hatched in the form of an egg. Time passed bit by bit. In the depths of the lava, inside the fiery phoenix egg, Li Qingshan felt that he was no longer a ball of chaotic liquid. His body was gradually taking shape, thin bones, tender skin, flowing blood. Inch by inch, an embryonic form was taking shape. His thoughts were also becoming clearer and clearer, clearer than ever. During this process of reconstructing his body, his divine sense was also being refined. Under the control of his mind, every single bone and every single meridian in this new body was condensed with the most reasonable and perfect structure. It was still very tender, but it contained tremendous potential. However, this was not even the most delightful thing for him. The various conflicts that had existed in his body the entire time had not just been the spirit turtle and the phoenix. The spirit turtle, the ox demon, and the tiger demon were also in a relationship of suppression and suppression. Ever since he reached the 5th layer of the ox demon, suppression had become extremely difficult. Even the ox demon and tiger demon were not actually on good terms with each other. The ox demon was as steady as a mountain, while the tiger demon howled like a fierce gale. How could there not be conflicts and resistance between them? It was just that they did not stand out too much under the greater conflict. Every single transformation of the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine was an extremely powerful living being, possessing a clear, independent will. The ox demon would not change its determination, while the tiger demon challenged everything. The spirit turtle sank into the abyss, while the phoenix soared in the sky. The more powerful they were, the more prominent their differences and conflicts became. When it gave him power and abilities that surpassed other demons, it also led to great internal friction. As for the demon heart, the ocean pearl, and the divine talisman of great creation that represented different paths of cultivation, they were also filled with conflict and interfered with one another. This was a price that he had to pay. Unless he spent tremendous amounts of time reconciling them, the greater his cultivation, the greater the internal friction would be. Many of the time, once he reached that point in cultivation, he would not even have the opportunity to reconcile them. In other words, he should have been even more powerful. He clearly possessed 100% of his strength, yet he could only unleash 70 to 80% of it. 20 to 30% of his strength was not to be underestimated. If he possessed this in the past, he could have killed MOU extremely easily. In a battle between experts, even a slight difference in strength could be fatal. It was impossible for the Dragon King of the Sea to force him to such a state, as he would fly faster, and the speed at which he purified the ink on his body would be faster too. It would be enough for him to erase his traces and conceal his presence before the Dragon King of the Sea caught up to him, vanishing into the dense forests of the Mist Province. It was not too late to mend the pen after the sheep were lost. Once his past body was burned up in the flames, the body reborn from chaos would still be very young, but it would also be an unprecedented opportunity. Without destruction, there could be no construction. He would have the opportunity to find his lost power. The Phoenix's Nerva was not something he could use to fake his death and escape when he was being hunted down. Instead, it was an even more glorious rebirth. Li Qingshan dismissed his thoughts and forgot about everything else. He prepared for the day. He broke out of his shell. Perhaps due to the influence of the flames of the earth, he gathered, the eruptions of the volcano above him became extremely frequent. Magma constantly sprayed and flowed, and volcanic ash never dispersed. The Phoenix's embryo and the Azura field slowly moved upwards before he knew it. Boom! Along with an earth-shattering boom, the volcano erupted once again. Countless scorching hot rocks flew thousands of feet into the sky, arcing through the air and falling into the distance. Among them was an oval phoenix's embryo, which shone with a faint, scarlet light. As the magma around it rapidly dried up, apart from its shape, it no longer seemed any different from regular rocks. Chapter 7:13. The stone egg passed through the black smoke condensed from volcanic ash and shot into the sky. It gradually slowed down, and finally it ran out of momentum and began to fall, falling into the embrace of the earth. With a thump, it struck the grayish-brown earth, creating a great pit. Several hours later, the volcano settled down. The magma slowly cooled down, and the volcanic ash settled down. The stone egg lay quietly in the pit. Smack! A droplet of rain landed on the ground. Whoosh! Rain fell from the sky. The rain kicked up a white mist that lingered in the wilderness. When the rain fell into the craters of the volcanoes, it evaporated into smoke. Pillars of white smoke rose up from the volcanoes like beacons. The volcanoes that originally represented terrifying destruction actually possessed a strange, immortal aura right now. However, the air became even more humid and stuffy. When the rain became lighter, more than a dozen figures appeared on the ground. They were all wearing only a pair of jeans, and their naked bodies were strong and healthy. Their tawny skin was brightly colored, and it was hard to tell if it was a tattoo or a painting. They were filled with a savage aura. The Mist Province had always been known as the Land of the South, so the people who lived in the jungles of the Mist Province were obviously known as barbarians. The barbarians all carried a basket on their backs and held long poles in their hands. The ends of the poles were metal claws. At first glance, they seemed like a group of scavengers, but in reality, they were basically the same. However, they were not scavenging rubbish or trash, but rocks that had erupted from the craters of the volcanoes. The scavengers spread out, each guarding a place. They hunched their bodies and widened their eyes as they searched the ground. First, they would use a long pole to grab something, and then they would rub it in their hands. If it was an ordinary stone, they would directly throw it on the ground. If it was sparkling, they would reveal a joyful expression and throw it into the basket behind them. This cluster of volcanoes might be a dangerous place of death, but there were plenty of precious ores as well. The metals that had been tempered by the earth fire were materials for forging divine weapons. There were even fire spirit rocks and fire crystals that were priceless. At this moment, a young barbarian discovered a strange item in the distance. The item was only the size of a palm, and it was weightless in his hand. There were some strange patterns on it, like it was wrapped in a floral cloth. The strangest part was that the item had not been burned away by fire, nor had it been wet by water. It did not even have a speck of dust on it. Even the barbarians, who did not have much knowledge, could sense that something was out of the ordinary, and that was the Azura field. The Azura field was not far away from the Phoenix egg, and it was also ejected. However, the Azura field could now truly be considered an arcane treasure. Its divine splendor was restrained, and no spiritual energy leaked out. Let alone the bodies of mortals, even ordinary cultivators might not be able to see through its effects. Come here, come here. What's this? The young barbarian shouted loudly. Although his tone was strange, the language he used was no different from that of Qing province. Although this world was much larger than Earth, there were not as many languages. Even the demon race used the same language. A group of barbarians gathered around and expressed their opinions on the Azura field, but none of them could tell what it was. Someone suggested that the young barbarian tear it open and take a look. Perhaps there was something good hidden inside. The young barbarian didn't want to do it. He was afraid that it would be torn apart, but he couldn't resist the urging of the people around him. He pulled a little, and the Azura field naturally didn't move at all. The crowd roared with laughter, laughing at him for not even being able to open a cloth bag. How useless! All of you, shut up! The young barbarian gritted his teeth and used all his strength to pull. However, The azure field still didn't move, and the laughter became even more intense. "Let me do it." The strongest barbarian snatched the azure field. His face was red from holding it in, but the result was the same. In the end, a few barbarians worked together, but they couldn't move it at all. After confirming that it wasn't an ordinary item, they returned it to the young barbarian. Everyone was envious of his luck, and the oldest barbarian said, "Child, keep it well. It might be able to be exchanged for a lot of good things." The barbarians went back to search, and their eyes widened even more. They hoped that their own families could have such luck. After a while, another person shouted loudly and called everyone over. The barbarian discovered a strange stone. The stone was even bigger than a human head, and it was round like an egg. "Isn't this just a stone?" a barbarian said, unhappily. His luck wasn't too good. Not only did he not discover anything strange, but he also collected the least amount of ores. "No, this is an egg. When I picked it up just now, it even moved a little," the barbarian who discovered the stone said with certainty. The two of them argued and almost fought. In the end, they asked the old barbarian to appraise it. He hugged the stone egg and looked at it for a while. According to his many years of experience in picking stones, this was just an ordinary stone formed from lava. It just happened to look like an egg. "Child, don't waste your energy. Throw it away." The crowd dispersed. The barbarian looked at the stone egg in his hand. He still felt that it looked like an egg, or at least it had been an egg before it turned into stone. However, since the old barbarian said it wasn't worth much, he hesitated for a moment and threw it into the stone pit. If he brought this stone egg along, he wouldn't be able to carry many ores. After a while, the ground trembled. Another volcano nearby began to erupt, and the barbarians all fled. Just now, the barbarian who had picked up the stone egg passed by the stone pit and took a look. He stopped and picked up the stone egg, hugging it in his arms. The barbarians retreated to the foot of the mountain, and what appeared before them was a boundless sea. The terrain rose and fell like the waves of the sea, while the barbarian group of volcanoes was a lone island in the sea. They arrived at the shoreline and dove back into the seawater. They were like fish that had returned to the sea. They moved through the jungle nimbly, pushing aside the disturbing leaves and advancing along a small, almost indistinguishable path that was covered in greenery. There were very few decent paths in the Mist Province. Most of them were small paths like this. Even if the vegetation in the way was cut down by weapons and axes, it would grow back in just a few days. If no one used a path, it would be swallowed by greenery very soon. Soon, a stockade surrounded by logs appeared in front of them. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Forests always contain various dangers, so it was still the village that gave them the most peace of mind. The stone egg and the azure field lay in 2 bamboo baskets as they entered the village of barbarians. A few days later, a group of several dozen people arrived before the village. They were all equipped with weapons, and their attire was no different from that of regular barbarians. Their heads were wrapped in green cloth, and they all carried a pouch on their shoulders. They all gave off a sense of competence. They rode high up on over a dozen pack beasts that resembled neither oxen nor horses. The sturdy pack beasts easily carved out a path through the forest. In particular, the pack beast at the very front was the tallest and strongest. The leader of these people sat on it. He seemed to be in his 40s or 50s. His coarse face was weathered, and his hair that had already begun to turn white was braided into a large braid. His eyes shone brightly, and the pair of large, shiny, golden earrings on his ears were particularly eye-catching. "Open up. The gold's here." Gold earrings bellowed at the top of his lungs like he was singing. His extremely penetrating voice spread through the entire village very soon. "The merchants of Goldie Fort are here. Open up the gate." Shouts rang out from within the village, and the gate suddenly opened. As the merchants lined the path to welcome them, they walked in proudly. The barbarians who had gone to pick up stones laid them out for the merchants to choose. The merchants brought out all sorts of goods to exchange. Gold Earrings was drinking with the old chief when a subordinate suddenly came in and said to him, "Master, go and take a look. We've discovered a wondrous item." "Oh, what wondrous item?" Gold Earrings immediately stood up. Rare ores would appear in these volcanoes from time to time. His mission this time was to circle around these volcanoes and visit over a dozen villages. Then he would transport the items he exchanged for to Fragrant Flower Market and sell them. He would be able to earn 10 times the profit. However, he had been a merchant for decades, and there were not many items that could be called wondrous items. "I don't know. It looks like it's woven from cloth, but no one can tell for sure, nor can they tell what it's used for." Gold Earrings was stunned. His subordinate was experienced and knowledgeable, but he could not even tell what material it was made of. He could not help but become even more interested. He rushed over to take a look, and his eyes immediately lit up. Although he did not know what it was used for, he could tell from the material that it was not an ordinary item. Could it be a spiritual weapon? Although he had a lot of inner force, he could not see any spiritual light. However, he was prepared. A small bug flew out from the pouch at his waist. The bug flew to the Azura field, but there was no reaction. He immediately revealed a disappointed expression. The young barbarian quickly performed. He took out the saber at his waist and slashed at the Azura field a few times. Naturally, the Azura field remained unscathed. There must be something good inside for it to be wrapped in such a good cloth. It's worth a lot. Gold Earrings hesitated for a moment. In the end, he spent a jar of salt and a saber to buy this wondrous item of unknown use. This wondrous item had definitely been refined in a special way. He might be able to sell it for a high price in Fragrant Flower Market. Even if he failed with his silver tongue, he would not suffer a loss. The barbarian hugged the jar of salt and the saber in satisfaction. Just as the merchant group was about to leave, a barbarian rushed out and blocked their way. He raised the stone egg in his hand high. "Good egg, good egg. I don't want a saber. I just want salt." He had brought back the stone egg with great difficulty, but in the end, he had not been able to sell it. How could he be satisfied when he saw his clansmen easily earn a jar of salt? Gold Earrings took the stone egg and examined it. There were no signs of it being polished. It seemed to be naturally formed. He placed it by his ear and listened. Then he knocked it a few times. The sound was deep, and it did not seem hollow. Even if it was really an egg, it was a dead egg. "I found this along with the cloth bag. It came from a volcano, so it must be something good. I'll lose out if I don't buy it." Chapter 7:14. The fragrant flower market was called a market, but it was surrounded by green walls that stood several meters tall. People moved about on the streets, and the buildings were lined up one after another. It was quite a large city, which was uncommon in the Mist Province. It gathered countless villages and tribes within a range of several hundred kilometers for trade. After the group of merchants, led by gold earrings, entered the city, they were like a droplet of water that had merged into a lake, vanishing very quickly. Only a dozen or so days later did they emerge again. Gold Earrings was still at the forefront. He had changed into a brand new set of clothes, and his hair and beard had been combed again. He was in high spirits. This was definitely not just because he had gotten a good night's sleep and a hot bath in the city, but also because he had benefited far more from this trip than he had anticipated. That flowery cloth bag of unknown function had actually been sold for a high price of 100 taels of gold during the monthly Fragrant Flower Market's auction. Right now, it was placed heavily in the bag beside him. Up until now, he still hadn't figured out what that flowery cloth bag was used for. He had only announced at the auction that it contained precious ancient treasures, and that even the most powerful experts with the sharpest swords wouldn't be able to damage it in the slightest. When he thought up to there, he could not help but feel some regret. If he had known this earlier, he would have definitely sold it for an even higher price. However, none of the people who wanted to buy the bag were people he could afford to offend. If he were in Goldie Fort, then so be it, but in the Fragrant Flower Market, he was afraid of stirring up trouble, or there would most likely be problems on the way back. Just losing the item would already be considered lucky, but he probably would not even be able to keep his life. If he casually tossed the corpse into the forest, all the wolves, tigers, leopards, snakes, insects, rats, and ants within a few kilometers would be drawn over by the smell of blood. In just a few hours, not even bones would remain. At the very least, he could return with peace of mind now. Although he had brought quite a lot of gold and silver with him, he could deal with all the people who regarded gold and silver with importance. Even if he could not deal with them, he still had the name of Goldie Fort. He basically would not fall out with someone over some gold and silver. There were obviously many people who did not even regard Goldie Fort with importance, but these people would never regard gold and silver with importance. Gold Earrings had been a merchant for many years and had thought through these matters very thoroughly. His only regret was that the stone egg had not been sold. It was still in his bag. After all, not all businesses would be successful. At his age, he was used to this kind of failure. It would not affect his good mood. He called out to the team behind him, "Boys, don't be so quiet. Sing for me." "All right, Uncle Bow." The team's morale was high, and the shortest and most capable guy was singing at the top of his lungs. "Hey, hey, hey, we're barefooted after walking through the mountains and the sea. If you meet a mountain, you will step on it. If you meet water, you will wash your muddy feet. You won't look back even if you hit the ceiling. Hey, hey, hey." The loud and clear song resounded through the sky. Everyone's face was brimming with joy, and the whole team began to sing. Having traveled the ancient paths for many years, they did not have to worry about running into any powerful demonic beasts. Instead, the song could alarm them and deter the wild beasts. Although the Mist Province was known as a land of wilderness, the common people who grew up in the wilderness were renowned for their ability to sing and dance. They had not been brought up by the teachings of etiquette, so they were not bound by etiquette either. They were closer to the carefree and natural nature of ancient people dancing around bonfires. Whether they were men or women, young or old, they could all sing a few songs. From a certain perspective, this was their civilization and legacy. However, this cheerful atmosphere came to a screeching halt on the evening of the fourth day. As soon as they crossed over a mountain stream, the surrounding vegetation grew thicker. The towering trees that had grown for who knew how many millennia listened to their singing silently. Suddenly, Gold Earrings sensed that something was amiss. The forest was rather eerily quiet. The docile pack animal beneath him shook its head uneasily. He waved his hand, wanting to stop the singing and listen carefully. Swish! A rock pierced the throat of the loudest young man, stopping the singing first. It's a powerful enemy. Gold Earrings immediately made a judgment. With his martial arts and his vigilance, he actually failed to see which tree the rock had come from. With a swish, he drew his blade and called out at the top of his lungs, "Gold's here!" This was a method for merchants from Goldie Fort to display their identities. There was no one within several hundred kilometers who did not know about it. However, the loud voice seemed to lose its original penetrative nature. A heavy murderousness spread out with the night mist, approaching the merchant group step by step. The pack animals all made in fear. They either had no idea or they did not care. "We're from Goldie Fort. Which cave or village do you come from? Come out and talk to us. If you want money or goods, we can negotiate." Pairs of jade green eyes lit up in the dark forest. The leaves rustled, and figures emerged one by one. Gold Earrings' face immediately changed. He blurted out, "The bone-eating tribe." The figures only seemed half-human, while the other half seemed like beasts. They were well-built and furry. Their arms were long and drooping, and their fingers were all sharp claws. A pair of sharp teeth protruded from their lips. Even when they hunched over, they were still taller than regular people. The sturdiest monster extended its scarlet tongue and licked its nose. It said in a hoarse, unpleasant voice, "I want people." With that, it lunged over with a fierce gust of wind. Gold Earrings swung his blade and landed on its shoulder, but it felt like he had struck the extremely tough hide of a rhinoceros. It only left behind a scratch, and he was pushed to the ground viciously. Even he was like that, so his subordinates were even worse off. They were all subdued in a single clash. They did not seem to have any intentions of killing, but when Gold Earrings thought of the rumors regarding the bone-eating tribe, his heart sank. However, this was no longer a situation that a martial artist like him could deal with. Even true shamans might not necessarily be able to escape alive, as these monsters were shamans. The pack beasts were directly slain, producing miserable wails. Their bags were ripped apart, and pieces of gold tumbled into the bushes, but they failed to draw a second glance from these monsters. What they wanted were people. The bone-eating tribe specialized in hunting their own kind and feeding on humans, not for filling their bellies, but to strengthen themselves through shaman arts. The more people they ate, the more powerful they would become, and their appearance and temperament would become more and more twisted and cruel. However, in the jungle where the strong were revered, no one would place importance on appearance and morality over strength. Regular barbarians were completely powerless against shaman tribes like that. The group of merchants were pressed to the side of the road, lined up in a row. Just now, the monster who had said, "I want people," began to choose. He grabbed one of Gold Earrings' earrings and ripped off the entire ear, tossing it into his mouth and chewing it. The meat's too tough. After choosing for a while, he finally chose the youngest one. He grabbed him and bit down on his neck, sucking hard. Only when he had sucked enough did he begin to chew away. The other monsters chose their targets too, lunging over to eat. For a moment, there was only the sound of chewing in the forest. Unlike their crude and vicious appearances, they ate extremely meticulously. None of the flesh or blood went to waste. Before every droplet of blood hit the ground, they would suck it clean. Even the bones were forcefully chewed and swallowed. Gold Earrings, who had been determined to be too tough, managed to avoid the first round of the banquet by luck. As he gazed at this nightmarish sight, his body stiffened, unable to move. There was a flash from the corner of his eye, and he saw a ring of scarlet light flash in the bushes. The stone egg that had been determined to be a regular rock was currently glowing slightly as if something was about to break out of its shell. You're tuning into the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.